Chapter 3387. Great Sun Heavenly Venerable's attack had pushed all the emperors of the Fortune God dynasty towards Yishuan. In addition to the emperors, South Tianzuan and Warlord didn't look too good either. Both of them were hardliners against the outer domain. Now that they were being slapped in the face by a junior from the outer domain, they were naturally furious. This was especially so for War Sovereign. He was the celestial venerable whose name didn't match up to the truth. Now that he was being slapped in the face, even if he was shrewd, he wouldn't be able to hold it in. Moreover, these heavenly venerables were all acting according to their hearts. Their so-called shrewdness wasn't that deep. It was just that their considerations were far deeper than the average person's. But at this time, Yishuan, who seemed to be avoiding the battle, finally stood up and said indifferently, "It's a miracle that you can live until now." What? Great Sun Heavenly Venerable was stunned for a moment, then immediately became cold. I said that it's a miracle that you can live until now. Your strength is mediocre, but you still dare to be so arrogant. Yishuan said indifferently. Great Sun Heavenly Venerable sneered and said, "I haven't seen your strength, but I have seen some of your sharp words. Enough nonsense. Let's fight, do you dare? What do you two want to do? Do you want to delay this operation?" South Tianzuan's face immediately darkened, and he looked at the two coldly. To him, the most important thing was this operation. He could ignore everything else, but if someone dared to threaten this operation, then he wouldn't be polite. He was very clear what was most important. South Tianzuan, rest assured, it won't take long to deal with this trash. It won't delay the operation, Yishuan said indifferently. Good, what a big tone. You can't let loose here. Do you dare to follow me to the starry sky? Great Sun Heavenly Venerable said. Taoist Wuzun, be careful, don't be fooled. This Great Sun Heavenly Venerable absorbs the power of the sun and moon. The boundless starry sky is his home ground. Warlord said quickly. Everyone looked at the two of them. The boundless starry sky was indeed a place for ordinary heavenly venerables to solve problems. But if this was the home ground of Great Sun Heavenly Venerable, and this was a trap he set, then it was a different matter. Dear friend, you don't have to worry. It doesn't matter where you are dealing with him, Yishuan lightly said. Everyone, please wait for a moment. After speaking, Yishuan took the lead and stepped into the boundless starry sky. With his current leg strength, he naturally stepped into that vast and boundless place in an instant. Oomph. The Great Sun Heavenly Lord snorted coldly and chased after him. He was like a blazing sun walking in the void. Martial honor? Interesting. Let me see how much strength you have now. Heavenly Venerable narrowed his eyes, but ultimately did not stop Yishuan and Heavenly Venerable Great Sunday. Aside from him, Undying Evil Lord had not spoken a word since the beginning. His gaze was focused on the starry sky, but the occasional burst of light in his eyes revealed that he was not feeling very calm. Boom! A loud bang exploded in the universe. Both sides didn't even wait for the troops to get into formation. The Great Sun Heavenly Lord directly transformed into a blazing sun and suppressed Yishuan. He was very domineering and wanted to kill Yishuan immediately. Yishuan raised his hand and blasted out a punch. The first time both sides collided, it directly turned into a terrifying energy wave that swept out. That blazing sun was shattered, but Yishuan did not move at all. It was as if the shocking killing method of the Great Sun Heavenly Lord had no effect on him at all. And after that blazing sun was shattered, the figure of the Great Sun Heavenly Lord finally appeared. The flames burning on his body burned even hotter, the blazing light almost cooling the entire universe. Both sides faced each other from afar, the laws on their bodies devouring and eroding each other. Many emperors saw this scene and felt their expressions change slightly, because they discovered that around both sides, countless laws were being crushed and modified, then crushed and modified again. Just like that, they were constantly being destroyed and modified. This was the fighting method of a heavenly venerable. Only a heavenly venerable could withstand it. If it were them, they would not even be able to withstand a single blow. This kind of modification of the laws was the most well-known. It was enough to make an emperor unable to display any strength at all. Both of them were not at the level of the heaven-devouring demon emperor back then. Although the heaven-devouring demon emperor had entered the heavenly venerable realm, he had just entered and his realm had not been stabilized. He could not display many of the techniques of a heavenly venerable. Naturally, he was unable to erupt with such a shocking result. Previously, when the great sun Heavenly Lord fought with the War of Venerable, there didn't seem to be such a large-scale confrontation of laws. You have some skills. Martial Venerable. I heard that you were someone who killed a Heavenly Venerable when you were a peak Emperor. Is this all you have? The great sun Heavenly Lord said coldly, as if he was mocking Yishuan. It's more than enough to take care of you. Yishuan said coldly. He took a slight step, and instantly, an extremely mysterious acceleration array appeared below him, making it seem as if he was stepping on a ray. This array contained extremely mysterious speed laws. It could almost be said to have evolved the speed laws to the extreme. Swish! All of a sudden, Yishuan appeared in front of the great sun Heavenly Lord. As if responding to the great sun Heavenly Lord's words just now, Yishuan used his hand as a sword and formed a terrifying sword Dao wave, slashing towards the great sun Heavenly Lord's head. The great sun Heavenly Lord's eyes burst with a terrifying light. Yishuan's peerlessly fast sword slashed directly towards the great sun Heavenly Lord's body, but it directly passed through the great sun Heavenly Lord's body. The great sun Heavenly Lord, who seemed to be completely fine, counterattacked almost instantly. A blazing flame spear appeared in his hand, and the spear was aimed directly at Yishuan's face. Yishuan took a few steps and instantly retreated thousands of miles away. However, this spear followed him like a shadow, like a long dragon, crossing thousands of miles of the starry sky, directly chasing after him. Huh! Yishuan let out a long roar. Instantly, extremely terrifying fluctuations of the laws erupted. His body swayed like a storm, causing his figure to be unable to be seen clearly. This spear pierced through these fluctuations of the laws. It was as if it had entered a maze in an instant. Yishuan was clearly in front of it, but it pierced through his ear. Looking from afar, it seemed as if Yishuan had barely avoided this spear. What? It actually didn't hit. The great sun Heavenly Lord's face revealed a somewhat surprised expression. It actually didn't kill Yishuan directly. This was also something that he completely didn't expect. In fact, it didn't even manage to injure him slightly. After the spear light that passed by Yishuan's ear missed, it directly turned into a sky full of flames, burning the entire heaven and earth. Huge cracks were burned in the void, and chaos poured out from it. These flames formed a frenzied, flaming storm, completely engulfing Yishuan in an instant. However, very quickly, everyone discovered that when these flaming storms fell on Yishuan's body, they were actually absorbed into his body. These flames that could burn through the world couldn't do anything to Yishuan. A little interesting. Body voidification. I haven't encountered such an ability for a long time. Yishuan didn't care about the many flames around him, but said with interest, "Is this all you've got? Show me your full strength. You're not worthy of my attack at all." The great sun Heavenly Lord's face revealed a somewhat angry expression. Although he was the one who attacked most of the time just now, in reality, all kinds of attacks couldn't do anything to Yishuan. However, Yishuan's casual attack had forced him to reveal his trump card of being able to Ifei. This was something that hadn't happened even when he was fighting against the War Elder during the most intense time. This Yishuan seemed to be far more troublesome and difficult to deal with than the War Elder. All right, then I'll do as you wish. The great sun Heavenly Lord also knew that if he didn't show some of his abilities, he probably wouldn't be able to deal with Yishuan. His entire body was glowing, the void was distorting, and all the laws were being modified, and the scope of this modification was getting wider and wider, completely turning the entire battlefield into a sea of flames, eliminating all the other laws here, and completely turning it into his own home ground. Here, within his domain, he was the only ruler. Even if it was a veteran Heavenly Lord, he wasn't afraid. Swish! In just an instant, an unimaginable wave emerged, and then immediately after, the great sun Heavenly Lord turned into a ball of flames, blasting towards Yishuan. This speed was really fast to the extreme, breaking through the common sense of the universe, almost reaching an unparalleled level. Not only was his attack power unparalleled, but his speed was also fast to the extreme. This such a fast speed. Everyone only felt that the speed was fast to the extreme, especially the Emperors. Their primordial spirits couldn't even keep up, and they couldn't even see it. Only the Heavenly Lords could see a little. But they also had to look at it in a different light. This speed was indeed fast enough. The great sun Heavenly Lord had such confidence. It definitely wasn't an undeserved reputation. Boom! This attack directly blasted in front of Yishuan. That ball of flames could destroy heaven and earth. And it was where the essence of the sun essence fire was. Even a Heavenly Lord couldn't block such a surprise attack. However, such an attack suddenly stopped 3 inches in front of Yishuan, as if it had encountered a transparent city wall. Yishuan sneered slightly. You may not know what kind of scene it is when I go through the tribulation, but you want to hurt me with this level of flames? Today, I'll let you know if my reputation is undeserved, and if I picked up a bargain. His big hand suddenly slapped out, turning into a huge hand that directly blasted towards that ball of flames. Chapter 33:88. The huge hand slammed down, and suddenly everything was annihilated. That huge hand was like a huge hand that could destroy the world, annihilating everything. Nothing could be transmitted out, and everything was annihilated within it. The fluctuations of the laws were extremely violent, constantly being modified and repaired, and modified again. The battle between celestial venerables was basically the modification and restoration of the laws. As for martial arts, it was just a means to materialize this kind of battle. Yishuan had already stepped into the peak of the second realm. Naturally, it was not the same as when he had just entered the celestial venerable realm. The martial arts he learned were also naturally deduced to the celestial venerable level, so there would not be the awkward situation of using the power of a celestial venerable to use an emperor's move. The flames suddenly disappeared without a trace, revealing the appearance of celestial venerable great sun, and then he was slapped on the spot. Pump! The great sun Heavenly Venerable's entire body exploded into pieces as his flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Many people suddenly sucked in a mouthful of cold air. They had seen Yishuan's palm strike a moment ago. It couldn't be said that it was fast. However, that terrifying and matchless offensive power had made them terrified. With a mighty momentum, all the martial arts were integrated into this palm. There was no way to escape, and they could only fight with all their strength. And obviously, Celestial Venerable Great Sun's result had already explained everything. He was smashed into pieces on the spot, flesh and blood flying everywhere. Many people simply couldn't believe it. They had all seen the battle between the Great Sun Heavenly Venerate and the War Venerate. Even when the battle was at its most intense, the Great Sun Heavenly Venerate had always had the upper hand. The War Venerate had at most injured the Great Sun Heavenly Venerate a little, but to say that he had been torn apart was something that had never happened before. Therefore, the difference in strength was already very clear. Celestial Venerable Great Sun attacked for a long time, but couldn't do anything to Yishuan. Yishuan officially fought back, and with one blow, he collapsed. Is the difference in strength really that big? Many people said in disbelief. So powerful. Is this the martial venerable who created a miracle? A foreign emperor couldn't help but murmur to himself. Of course, when Wu Zun was a peak emperor, he had already killed a heavenly venerable. Now that he has stepped into the heavenly venerable realm, his strength is naturally incomparable to before. At this time, a Fortune Divine Dynasty's emperor couldn't help but say. Previously, when Zhan Zun had lost to the Great Sun Heavenly Venerable who was about to become an Empyrean, they had been ridiculed for a while, saying that the Fortune God Dynasty no longer had anyone capable, and that there was no successor. However, They couldn't refute the fact that Zhang Zun was defeated. But it was different now. Yi Shiwen easily counterattacked and smashed the great sun heavenly venerable into pieces. This was enough for them to hold their heads high. Tianzuan Nan was indifferent to this because he had already guessed Yi Shiwen's strength. It was useless even if great sun Tianzuan could overturn the heavens. Undying Evil Master's expression finally turned solemn, as if a little surprised. Since when did such a powerful heavenly venerable appear in the Fortune Divine Dynasty? With his strength, he could more or less see some clues. And according to the information he received, this person had only become a heavenly venerable 10,000 years ago, and 10,000 years to a heavenly venerable was really just a snap of the fingers. In just a snap of the fingers, he had improved to this stage. Such a speed could be said to be shocking. How could these old fellows who had lived for hundreds of millions of years endure this? Even with his state of mind, he couldn't help but change slightly. Yi Shiwen's strength was not enough to shock him. What shocked him was this speed of improvement. He felt that he really needed to investigate this person's roots. Although the strength of an Empyrean was accumulated over time, there were always some exceptions. There were some heaven-gifted geniuses who could cultivate at an incomparably fast speed, as if they were riding a rocket. These kinds of people couldn't be underestimated the most. Loud roars reverberated throughout the universe. Great Sun Heavenly Venerable, whose body had been smashed apart, was reconstructing his physical body in the distance. With his heavenly venerable strength, he could naturally recover to his original state in an instant. His expression was ferocious. He was naturally furious after being smashed apart by Yi Shiwen just now. He was extremely confident in his own strength and even didn't care about Yi Shiwen looking down on the world. But this was the result in a single exchange. How could he accept this? Yi Shiwen didn't pursue him. He only said coldly, "Great Sun, Heavenly Venerable, you only have this much strength? You've really disappointed me." You, Great Sun, Heavenly Venerable, seemed to be able to see some coldness and contempt in Yi Shiwen's expression. He was furious to the extreme. Yi Shiwen actually didn't pursue him. It was obvious that he didn't care about him. Great Sun, Heavenly Venerable was even more furious. He put his palms together and made a few seals. He only felt that the world was spinning violently. He was truly enraged. He was completely enraged by Yi Shiwen. The flames on his body burned fiercely. He was indescribably domineering. He called himself Great Sun Heavenly Venerable, so he naturally had the tyranny of a blazing sun. At this moment, it was vividly reflected. All the flames on his body turned into a sea of fire in an instant. Then it spread out in all directions. As for himself, he had actually turned into a blazing sun. This was not an illusion, nor was it an illusion. He had truly and thoroughly turned into a blazing sun. And at this moment, endless energy surged over from all directions. It was the power of the stars in the boundless starry sky. It completely condensed into his body, making the power on his body stronger and stronger. Not good. He is devouring the power of the stars and turning it into his own. War Elder's expression changed instantly because he suddenly recognized this move. Previously, he was caught off guard and lost to this move. Originally, although Great Sun Heavenly Venerable was stronger than him, it was impossible to determine the victor without hundreds of years of fighting. However, after Great Sun Heavenly Venerable used this move, he was completely defeated. He wasn't a match for him at all. After devouring the stars, Great Sun Heavenly Venerable's strength rose crazily. Originally, he could only be regarded as a tyrannical person in the first realm. But very quickly, he climbed to the peak of the first realm. It was as if his entire body could illuminate the entire creation realm. It was extremely terrifying. He walked between heaven and earth like the incarnation of the sun god. And he was indeed the incarnation of the sun. It was extremely terrifying and made people tremble in fear. Looking at it from the creation realm, it was as if there was suddenly another blazing sun in the sky. Two blazing suns in the sky. Such a scene was extremely shocking. It wasn't something that ordinary people could imagine. Taoist Wu Zun, be careful. This move of his is very difficult to deal with. Yishuan heard War Elder's figure, but he was expressionless and his expression didn't change. The clothes on his body were fluttering due to the law waves that rolled back from Great Sun, heavenly venerable. His fine black hair scattered in the wind and waves, dancing wildly in the wind. Wu Zun, I'll let you see my true strength now. Great Sun, heavenly venerable roared and suddenly rushed out. That blazing sun rushed towards Yi Shiwen at an astonishing speed. It's useless. I've said it before. You're too weak. Yi Shiwen didn't panic. Facing Great Sun, heavenly venerable who was rushing over, he directly punched out. This punch turned into a six-paths roulette that constantly rotated behind him. Every time it rotated, his fist force would be enhanced. When the six paths were all rotated, the entire fist force had already reached a state that was difficult to match. He wasn't in a hurry to chase after him. He didn't just want to defeat Great Sun, heavenly venerable. He also wanted to destroy his pride in one go. Whenever he thought of him in the future, he would have a shadow in his heart. At that time, such a person would be more or less crippled. It was just that Yi Shiwen rarely used such a method. Because if it wasn't under such circumstances, if it was in the outer domain, he would usually choose a simpler and more violent solution, which would be to kill Great Sun, heavenly venerable. Once and for all, he would cut off the weeds at the roots and cut off everything. Kill. This blazing sun rushed over at an astonishing speed. Yi Shiwen's fist force turned into the six paths roulette and suppressed it. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A shocking collision sound rang out. Even if it was transmitted to the creation realm, it was like a muffled thunder exploding in everyone's heart. Everyone could only see that the blazing sun emitted endless flames that tried to surround, burn, and melt the six paths roulette. But it was completely useless. The fist force emitted from the six paths roulette suppressed everywhere. The flames couldn't even get close to it, let alone burn it. Looking from afar, compared to the endless flames that occupied the boundless heaven and earth, the six paths roulette was like a small boat in the raging winds and huge waves, as if it could be destroyed at any time. Just when everyone thought the situation would last for eternity, the six paths roulette grew bigger and bigger. The wills of the living beings were all in it, as if it could encompass the heaven and earth. In just a blink of an eye, the flames were all suppressed, and in an instant they were all gone. Immediately after, the six paths roulette turned into a fist force that traversed across the sky. It dragged a figure that was billions of miles long and crashed into the blazing sun. Pump! The glorious sun, which was unimaginably tyrannical, exploded on the spot under this punch. A huge star exploding was a shocking scene, and this was exactly such a shocking scene. Endless flames and blood spread out. Looking from afar, it looked like the sun was about to fall. The second sun in the sky instantly dimmed and disappeared without a trace. Then, a figure flew out from the endless flames and bloodlight like a meteor streaking across the sky. It was unknown how many stars it had smashed before it finally managed to stabilize itself. Wah! Great Sun, heavenly venerable spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 3389. Everyone saw that there was a big hole in his chest, which had been pierced by Yi Shiwen's punch. In the distance, Yi Shiwen was still standing calmly in the boundless starry sky. His expression was indifferent, and he had no intention of chasing after heavenly venerable Great Sunday. He was just looking at him as though he was looking at a piece of trash. It wasn't that he couldn't do so, but he didn't want to, and he didn't want to. After understanding this point, the Great Sun, heavenly venerable, didn't feel any better. Instead, he spat out a mouthful of essence blood, scattering it on the stars. Every drop was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, piercing through the galaxy. Many sovereign emperors felt a chill run down their spines when they saw this scene, because they were also extreme powerhouses who had cultivated to the extreme. They naturally understood the meaning behind Yi Shiwen's actions. It was clearly telling the Great Sun, heavenly venerable, that he didn't put him in his eyes at all. So what? This kind of blatant contempt was far more infuriating than any other kind of humiliation. Previously, no matter how arrogant the great sun, heavenly venerable, was and how he looked down on the experts of the fortune god dynasty, it was merely contempt. However, Yishuan simply despised him and didn't take him seriously at all. If it were them, they would probably vomit blood out of anger. As an extreme expert who had walked a path that no one had ever walked before, their self-esteem was extremely strong without exception. This was the most intolerable thing to do. At the same time, they could also see that Yi Shiwen was trying to sever the great sun, heavenly venerable's heart. However, so what if they could see it? He was weaker than the great sun, heavenly venerable, and there was no way he could make a comeback. If it was a wily old fox who had been through hundreds of battles and was still able to fight on even after many defeats, it might not be much. But to a young and arrogant person like the great sun, this move was like a heart-piercing technique. He was most proud of his strength. Attacking from this aspect would deal a heavy blow to his willpower. If the great sun, heavenly venerable, couldn't hold on, it would be hard for him to improve. If he could, he would naturally be able to improve by leaps and bounds. Because of this, Yishuan rarely used this method unless it was absolutely necessary. Although it was very likely that the other party would be unable to recover from the setback. But as long as the other party didn't die, it was possible that he would benefit from it. Henceforth, he would advance by leaps and bounds, and would pose a threat to him. However, Heavenly Venerate Great Sun was a representative of the outer regions, so he naturally couldn't kill him. He could only use this method. However, he was just a little wary in his heart. So what if Heavenly Venerate Great Sun improved by leaps and bounds and stepped into the second realm? He was only one step away from the third level. Once he reached the third level, even those old heavenly venerables who had yet to pass the heaven-breaching barrier wouldn't be able to do anything to him, let alone a newbie like the Great Sun, Heavenly Venerable. The Great Sun, Heavenly Venerable, stared at Yishuan. His eyes were shining with hatred. His pride had been beaten down by the other party. This was a battle of the heart. He understood it very well, because in reality, his arrogance towards the War Venerable and his provocation towards Yishuan were also a battle of the heart. But it was clear that he had beaten the War Venerable. When he wantonly trampled on the War Venerable's dignity, he was slapped in the face by Yishuan. The other party's strength was overwhelming. Originally, this was nothing. Even the most arrogant Heavenly Venerable wouldn't dare to say he was invincible in the world. The only one who dared to say he was invincible in the world was the Fortune Creation Heaven Monarch. At that stage, he didn't need to loudly declare anything because he was an invincible existence just by standing there. But Yishuan had become a Heavenly Venerable at the same time as him. In fact, Yishuan's cultivation time was far shorter than his. Just like how he had beaten the War Venerable, he was also beaten by Yishuan ruthlessly. He was beaten until he saw stars and felt dizzy. However, even if they clearly knew Yishuan's thoughts, they would still fall into this pit, because the more powerful an extreme powerhouse was, the more casual they would be. No matter how hard they tried to conceal it on the surface, they would inevitably be greatly affected. He could still feel that his Tao heart was starting to become unstable. It was covered with dust, leaving behind a shadow. A cold snort traversed the vast sky and turned into a sharp arrow. It directly rushed towards Yishuan. This cold snort was fast and fierce. In just an instant, it had already rushed in front of Yishuan. Boom! This cold snort blasted into Yishuan's body. It was as if it had blasted into the sea. In an instant, it set off a shocking tide, causing Yishuan's body to instantly activate his defense. Endless fluctuations of the laws directly spread out. Under this fluctuation of the laws, the stars within a radius of thousands of miles were completely turned into nothingness. The time robe on Yishuan's body instantly appeared. At the critical moment, it blocked the sneak attack of this cold snort. Yishuan immediately became vigilant. Just a cold snort could actually cross layers of the starry sky and turn into a terrifying sneak attack. The depth of this person's skills was simply unimaginable. His gaze instantly followed the direction of this cold snort. His gaze penetrated the boundless starry sky, penetrated the fortune divine dynasty, and looked towards the outer domain. However, just as he was about to track the attacker, he suddenly stopped. This was because his gaze was blocked by an even more majestic force. He could not penetrate it and see the situation inside. Old ancestor Purple Scorpion, you can't hold back anymore. Suddenly, Lord South's clear voice came from the fortune realm, revealing the identity of the person who had spoken. It turns out that the young one was beaten, and the old one appeared. Yishuan immediately understood who the person who had attacked was. The old ancestor Purple Scorpion was the old ancestor of the Purple Scorpion Imperial family in the outer domain. He was also the first Purple Scorpion since the creation of the world. Naturally, his background and background were extraordinary. Originally, it was impossible for him to survive until now in his current condition. He should have fallen long ago during the barbaric era, when the creatures of the outer domain roamed freely. However, with great perseverance, he severed his own great way and recultivated the laws of the fortune divine dynasty. He became a heavenly lord and became a peerless powerhouse who could hold the sun and the moon in his hand. It was unknown how many generations the Purple Scorpion Imperial family had changed, but he still stood firm. This allowed this family to run amok in the outer domain. No one dared to provoke them. In the Stormy Sea area, even Pan-Tian-Tian, who was at the peak of his power and ruled over the 6 realms, didn't dare to provoke the Purple Scorpion Imperial family. It could be said that this old man was one of the few in the world. Old powerhouses like the Battle Emperor, who had followed the Fortune Heavenly Lord on expeditions, were considered as juniors in front of this old man. They were nothing. This was because the Battle Emperor had at most followed the Fortune Heavenly Lord on expeditions. However, the old ancestor Purple Scorpion was the enemy of the Fortune Heavenly Lord. Although he was defeated by the Fortune Heavenly Lord, there was no one in the world who hadn't been defeated by the Fortune Heavenly Lord. When the Fortune Heavenly Lord established the Fortune Divine Dynasty and pacified the outer domain, he had caused considerable trouble for the Fortune Heavenly Lord. Even though he was restricted by the Heavenly Gate Tribulation and his cultivation level had been reduced to the 3rd tier, he was still one of the most powerful beings in the world. Many people even suspected that he might have broken through the Heavenly Gate long ago. His current cultivation level was immeasurable. In short, the old ancestor Purple Scorpion was one of the most powerful existences in the outer domain. Even the Fortune Divine Dynasty hadn't been able to pacify the outer domain because of their existence. Yishuan had been restricted by the Heavenly Gate Tribulation. The old ancestor Purple Scorpion had told him about the origin of the Great Sun Heavenly Lord. In the past, the Great Sun Heavenly Lord had absorbed the essence of the Great Sun Heavenly Lord from the Great Sun Heavenly Lord. Later, he had been adopted by a big shot from the outer domain. He had been carefully guided and had finally stepped into the Heavenly Lord realm with irresistible force. And this big shot from the outer domain was the old ancestor Purple Scorpion. The old ancestor Purple Scorpion had treated the Great Sun Heavenly Lord very well. In fact, he had nurtured him as if he was his successor. The Great Sun Heavenly Lord had been traveling in the Fortune Divine Dynasty not long ago. He had provoked an extremely senior emperor and had been chased for 3 days and 3 nights. He had fled into the outer domain. Just when everyone thought that this matter had come to an end, the old ancestor Purple Scorpion, who hadn't shown his face for a long time, had suddenly appeared. He had broken into the Fortune Divine Dynasty and had slaughtered everyone from top to bottom. Even those who had escaped the calamity had been killed by the old ancestor's bloodline curse. Because of this matter, the Fortune Divine Dynasty had been enraged. At that time, the Space-Time Heavenly Lord, who had been in charge of the overall situation, had personally taken action. He had killed his way into the Purple Scorpion Imperial family and had carried out a massacre. But he had still been forced to retreat by the old ancestor Purple Scorpion. The Fortune Divine Dynasty had been powerful, but they had been unable to deal with a powerful clan from the outer domain. One could well imagine how powerful the old ancestor Purple Scorpion was. After that, the news had spread, and no one had dared to provoke the great sun, Heavenly Lord. No one had wanted to attract the old ancestor purple scorpion's revenge. This had allowed him to smoothly step into the Heavenly Lord realm. Especially when he had been crossing the tribulation, the old ancestor purple scorpion had personally acted to protect him. He had concealed the heaven's will, and no one had known about it. Otherwise, there would have been great waves, and things wouldn't have gone so smoothly. After sorting out these relationships, it wasn't difficult to guess why the old ancestor purple scorpion had taken action. Master, it's disciples' incompetence that has caused you to lose face. Tears flowed down the great sun, Heavenly Lord's face. He hadn't cried even when he had been defeated, but now he couldn't hold it in anymore. Yes, you are incompetent. A mere defeat has caused your Tao heart to be covered in dust, and your realm to become unstable. You're really useless. What does a real man count for if he fails once? A real man is tempered by thousands of trials and tribulations, and perseverance is what you call a good man. If I had been defeated by the fortune divine monarch back then, shouldn't I have committed suicide to apologize to the world? Suddenly, an extremely blurry figure appeared in front of the great sun, Heavenly Lord. He could barely make out the shape of a human, but he couldn't make out his appearance. He was coldly reprimanding the great sun, Heavenly Lord, as if he was reprimanding a child. Disciple understands. I will learn to be brave after knowing shame. A single defeat is nothing. Revered martial artist, I have lost today's matter. However, I will find you for a battle in the future. I will definitely defeat you and destroy your Tao heart. The great sun, Heavenly Lord, stared at Yi Shiwen with a sinister expression. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Chapter 3390. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Up to you, Yi Shiwen said indifferently. Instead, he looked at that figure. It was just a few words, but it was enough to restore the confidence of the great sun, Heavenly Venerable. This old ancestor purple scorpion was simply not an ordinary level of tyranny. This kind of old monster was the most troublesome. If he dared to bring up his previous defeat, it meant that he didn't care at all. His mind was terrifyingly firm. Defeat would not be a lifelong shame for this kind of person. Instead, it would become nourishment for his progress. Even at the same realm, this kind of person was more difficult to deal with than the great sun, Heavenly Lord, by more than 100 times. It was no wonder that he could still survive when so many giants of the desolate era had died. Moreover, it seemed that his life would only get better and better. Therefore, Yi Shiwen preferred to deal with this kind of person in a more simple and violent way. He would kill him directly to avoid future troubles. Unfortunately, he couldn't do that now. But you won't be so lucky next time. Yi Shiwen coldly looked at that vague figure. He could see that this wasn't the real body. It was just a soul incarnation. He could pinch it to death in a split second if he wanted to. But there was no need. Even if he was extremely angry, he didn't make a move. Seeing that Yi Shiwen was still ignoring him, the great sun, Heavenly Lord, was still extremely angry. However, he was no longer as mentally unstable as before. The main reason was that he was defeated by Yi Shiwen, which caused his Tao heart to become unstable. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost his composure like this. Oomph. The great sun, Heavenly Lord, snorted coldly. Kid, don't be too arrogant. You're just a junior. This world is not up to you to dominate. Old ancestor purple scorpion turned around and looked at Yi Shiwen. Although his face couldn't be seen, one could still feel the terrifying killing intent coming from him. Beat the young one, and the old one comes out. I know. Yi Shiwen smiled faintly. Everyone could hear the sarcasm in his words. Many people only felt cold sweat for Yi Shiwen. This was not an ordinary person. It was the old ancestor purple scorpion. Let me tell you what you just said. The next time you meet me, you won't be so lucky. Old ancestor purple scorpion said coldly. Let's talk about it the next time we meet. Yi Shiwen turned and took a step forward, leaving the boundless starry sky and returning to the Fortune God dynasty. Although the purple scorpion ancestor was tyrannical, but it was not enough to scare Yi Shiwen. If Yi Shiwen only had this much wisdom, then perhaps he would have already died on the path of cultivation. Master, your disciple has disappointed you. However, I will work hard and kill this revered martial artist in the future. The great sun, heavenly venerable, swore. Old ancestor Purple Scorpion declined to comment. Instead, he said, this failure might not necessarily be a bad thing for you. Ever since you were born, you have my protection. Therefore, it is inevitable that everything will be smooth sailing for you. Compared to those who have slaughtered their way up, there is still a gap. This time, I will teach you to remember that failure is nothing. What is frightening is those who are unable to recover after failure. They're trash. I believe you have heard of this saying before. The one who laughs in the end laughs the best. Disciple understands. Heavenly Venerable Great Sun said. Ancestor Purple Scorpion nodded and said, you must stay close to the undying evil Lord on the path of creation. Be careful of that martial honor. What? He actually dares? Heavenly Venerable Great Sun's face revealed a shocked and angry expression. In his opinion, Yishiwen actually did not dare to make a move against him. After all, he had such a great god behind him. In the Fortune God dynasty, how many people would dare to not give him face? Why wouldn't he dare? Do you think that what he said just now was just to scare you? Old ancestor Purple Scorpion said coldly. He still felt a little headache. Heavenly Venerable Great Sun was born noble and had an extraordinary foundation. Therefore, his cultivation had been smooth sailing. His starting point was the end point of most people's cultivation. However, it was also because of this that he had received too little tempering. Although he had traveled outside many times and experienced many fierce battles, in the eyes of a powerhouse who had lived through the desolate era, without experiencing many narrow escapes from death, how could one truly complete the transformation of one's temperament? Truly powerful people dared to go all out when facing experts, cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. They were not like Heavenly Venerable Great Sun, who could only deal with those who were far inferior to him. He could see that in a certain sense, Yishiwen was the same type of person as him. Once he had made up his mind, he would do anything to accomplish it. Not to mention in the outer domain, even if he was a Heavenly Venerable in the Fortune God dynasty, he would not be able to withstand his killing intent. Therefore, when dealing with such people, one had to either not offend them or kill them as much as possible. After all, if one did not kill such people, they would kill you. He believed that Yi Shiwen must be planning to deal with Heavenly Venerable Great Sun and even deal with him. It was just like how he was planning to get rid of this rising star of the Fortune God dynasty. It was precisely because of this that he repeatedly reminded Heavenly Venerable Great Sun to be careful. He did not dare to confirm whether Yishiwen would kill Heavenly Venerable Great Sun in the path of creation. At that time, it would be too late for him to regret. How could it be that easy to break into the Fortune God dynasty? Killing an emperor and killing a Heavenly Venerable were two completely different concepts. At that time, he would be crying his eyes out. For such matters, he would rather be prepared in advance. Heavenly Venerable Great Sun's expression changed several times. He could not believe his own feelings, but he believed in his master's judgment. Understand, I will be careful. Heavenly Venerable Great Sun nodded solemnly. All right, this time, you just need to settle the matter. Those old fellows will owe you a favor, and in the future, no one will dare to touch you in the outer domain. Old ancestor Purple Scorpion said, Master's painstaking nurturing, disciple is extremely grateful. Heavenly Venerable Great Sun quickly said, all right, go back. Don't delay the important matters. After saying that, old ancestor Purple Scorpion's figure exploded in the boundless starry sky. It turned out that this was just a mass of chaotic chi wrapped around a wisp of primordial spirit. Now that the primordial spirit was retracted, that mass of chaotic chi naturally dissipated. In just a moment, Yishiwen had already returned to the Fortune God capital. After this battle, many emperors looked at him with completely different eyes. Originally, in their opinion, people who had entered the Heavenly Venerable realm at the same time should have similar cultivation. But first, War Elder was defeated by Heavenly Venerable Great Sun without any suspense. Then, Heavenly Venerable Great Sun, who came with the momentum of a great victory, was ruthlessly slapped in the face, and it was even more thoroughly announced who was the most outstanding person among the Heavenly Venerables of this generation. Even many veteran Heavenly Venerables weren't this strong. If Heavenly Venerable Great Sun had defeated War Elder lightly, then Yishuan had almost completely defeated Heavenly Venerable Great Sun, ruthlessly slapping his face, leaving him unable to retaliate at all. With an absolutely domineering attitude, he had announced his strength. Perhaps in the future, no one would dare to underestimate this master. These emperors might not be able to see the difference between the realms of Heavenly Venerables, but at least they could see that Yishuan should be completely above the two of them. And compared to them, it was not difficult for the Heavenly Venerables present and watching the battle to guess that Yishuan had already entered the second realm. Between Heavenly Venerables, the gap between each realm was huge. At the last moment, Heavenly Venerable Great Sun had absorbed the power of the heaven and earth stars, and his cultivation had reached the peak of the first realm in a short period of time. But even so, in front of Yishuan, he still had no strength to retaliate. Although they had only exchanged a few moves, the huge gap between them could be easily perceived even by outsiders. If they guessed correctly, Yishuan should have already entered the Heavenly Venerable realm, and because of this, it made them feel incomparably shocked. Yishuan had just entered the Heavenly Venerable realm 10,000 years ago, and now he had actually crossed another heavenly tribulation. It only took him 10,000 years to improve more than ordinary Heavenly Venerables who spent hundreds of thousands of years. Such progress was naturally shocking. However, they did not know that Yishuan did not use his full strength. He had been suppressing Heavenly Venerable Great Sun the whole time. Therefore, everyone only knew that he had entered the second realm, but they did not know that not only had he entered the second realm, but he had also entered the peak of the second realm. He only needed a little more time to be able to enter the third realm. Otherwise, they would be even more shocked. Perhaps many people would have the thought of strangling him. Such progress was really too shocking. It had already broken their understanding of the norm. Perhaps it would cause them to panic and join forces to target him. This was also the reason why Yishuan was still hiding his strength. He was still waiting for his smooth transition to the third realm. At that time, even if they wanted to join forces to stop him, it would be impossible. At that time, his momentum would really be established. He did not care about anyone who tried to stop him. "Ah, well done. You taught this guy a good lesson," the War Elder greeted and said. Although he was not the one who defeated Yishuan, Yishuan taught him a good lesson and almost broke his Taoist heart. This made him feel incomparably happy. The depression that he had been feeling recently seemed to have been relieved all of a sudden. "It's just a small matter. At this level, it's just SOSO," Yishuan said lightly. These words made the powerhouses of the outer domain extremely unhappy. However, they didn't dare to say anything to Yishuan at this time. They were just Emperor Realm experts. Daring to talk nonsense in front of a heavenly master was simply courting death. Yishuan could not kill Heavenly Venerable Great Sun at this time. However, if it was just them, it would not be difficult. Very soon, Heavenly Venerable Great Sun also returned from the boundless starry sky. However, his complexion was not as good as Yishuan's. His injuries were fine, but he was in a bad mood after being dealt a heavy blow. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Heavenly Venerable South said, "All right, today's matter ends here. Next, we will open the path of creation. Everyone, get ready to set off." Chapter 33:91. Everyone's expression turned solemn because the path of creation was finally about to open. Southern Tianzuan waved his hand and released a signal. Suddenly, a strange wave spread out from the heavenly palace of creation and turned into a terrifying shockwave that rushed out. A golden beam of light swept out and directly shot into the depths of the void until cracks gradually appeared in the void. The aura of creation overflowed in all directions, and the desolate world once again appeared in front of everyone. After a violent tremor, this golden beam of light turned into a golden bridge. Now that the gate of the path of creation is open, everyone can step onto this rainbow bridge to reach it. However, there's one thing I have to make clear. Don't stay inside for too long. When you see this rainbow bridge start to flicker, it will be a reminder for you to return. Southern Tianzuan said, even for the Fortune Divine Dynasty, maintaining such a golden rainbow bridge was a strenuous task. Naturally, it was impossible for them to maintain it forever. Understood, everyone said in unison. Heavenly Lord Great Sun snorted coldly and took the lead to step into the rainbow bridge. His entire person instantly disappeared without a trace, directly entering that crack. Undying Evil Lord didn't say anything. He just followed Great Sun's footsteps and disappeared into the crack. Let's go, let's follow too. Yishuan turned and said to War Venerable. And War Venerable nodded. Both of them stepped onto the rainbow bridge together and instantly disappeared into the crack. After the four heavenly venerables entered the rainbow bridge, the other emperors also followed. Of course, they weren't going to rescue the heavenly venerables. That place wasn't something they could enter. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come up empty-handed after so many times of opening the path of creation. They were going in a search for law crystals. This was undoubtedly their fundamental goal. For those who had already stepped into the heavenly venerables realm, law crystals were extremely precious, let alone emperors. It was just that the scale this time was far less than the previous time, because the main goal this time was to rescue the heavenly venerables. This golden rainbow bridge couldn't exist forever and couldn't allow a large number of people to enter. This itself was part of the agreement between the two sides. After passing through the rainbow bridge, Yishuan once again entered the path of creation. At this time, he could no longer see the great sun heavenly venerable who had taken a step ahead of him. It was a desolate and boundless scene. There were crystals formed by the entanglement of solidified laws everywhere. However, these crystals could not be used. There were too many laws contained within them, so many that they could not be analyzed or moved. He ran quite fast. Yishuan sneered and said, you just slapped him in the face. How could he have the face to face you now? Moreover, he is probably afraid that you will kill him. The war elder said with a smile. He had just gotten his revenge, so he was in a good mood. Yishuan slightly smiled in a non-committal manner because he really had such an idea. As for that so-called old ancestor purple scorpion, even if he was powerful in the outer domain, he would have to wait until he had broken into the eastern region. The strength of the great heavenly masters had been greatly weakened after the heavenly past tribulation. This was undoubtedly the most advantageous situation for a rising star like Yishuan. Yishuan did not care about the great sun heavenly venerable. The real problem was the undying evil lord. This was a genuine third realm heavenly venerable. Although Yishuan had the ability to protect himself, it was unlikely that he could kill another heavenly venerable under his nose. We are now going to the land of creation through the path of creation. Yishuan said, do you know where the land of creation is? Yes, the land of creation is in the depths of the path of creation. It is just that ordinary emperor lords cannot sense it. Only heavenly venerables can sense it. In the past, it was originally a place where heavenly venerables cultivated. With our abilities, we should be able to sense it. The war elder thought for a moment and said, I understand. Yishuan immediately understood. He closed his eyes and released his divine sense. Soon, he felt a vague sensation, as if something was summoning him. He was all too familiar with this feeling. The reason why he had gone to the Fortune God dynasty from the myriad heavens realms was because of the call from the bottom of his heart. He had originally thought that the call was coming from the path of creation. Now, he understood that it was probably not from the path of creation, but from within the land of creation. But what exactly was in the land of creation? Why was there such a strong call? And as far as he knew, it seemed that he was not the only one who had been called to the Fortune realm. I sensed it. Come, let's go this way. Yishuan said immediately. Although the two of them had been to the path of creation before, they had obviously only heard some legends about the land of creation. In fact, they had never been there before. They had to sense it on the spot. Yishuan took the lead. He stepped out of the golden light and disappeared from the path of creation. Soon, the war elder followed closely behind. After Yishuan and the war elder left, many emperor lords arrived one after another. Then, they disappeared one after another, heading towards the place where the law crystals were produced. They did not have much time left. As for how much time they had, it would depend on when the great heavenly venerables would be able to rescue the people. Yishuan and the war elder followed the direction they had sensed and headed towards the depths of the path of creation. The closer they got to the depths of the path of creation, the more they could see the corpses of emperor lords everywhere. Although it had been hundreds of millions of years, the corpses were still flickering with the light of the law, emitting a terrifying sense of oppression. That's right, it's here. Yishuan's eyes lit up. He was gradually becoming familiar with the scene in front of him. It was the scene where he had stepped onto the path of creation more than 10,000 years ago. This was the path he had taken. It was just that while others had left from the outside to the inside, he had left from inside to the outside. This was not the first time Yishuan had come here, but it was the first time for the war elder. When he saw the corpses all over the ground, he could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. This was simply a huge graveyard for emperor lords. Who knew how many emperor lords had been buried here? This was just a path, but it was already so terrifying. The path of creation was indeed the greatest mystery of the creation realm since ancient times. The deeper they went, the higher the level of the emperor lords' corpses that appeared. Slowly, they could see the corpses of peak emperor lords. Such a scene inevitably made people feel a chill run down their spines. It should be known that the war elder was only a peak emperor lord not long ago. At this moment, he could not help but feel a little sad. However, Yishuan was different. He had walked this path long ago. Of course, the situation back then was naturally completely different from now. Back then, he had only just entered the emperor lord realm, but now, he was already a supreme heavenly venerable. His vision was naturally not the same as it was back then. If one were to take a closer look at these fallen sovereign lords on the path of creation, one would be able to see that the principles cultivated by these sovereign lords were completely different. It wasn't that the types were different, but the entire system was completely different from what Yishuan was familiar with. However, some of the laws in the solidified law crystals outside were similar. There were traces of time flowing on some of the corpses for hundreds of millions of years, and there were even some that Yishuan could not accurately calculate. This was completely different from the system of the Fortune God dynasty that he knew, and even the system of the outer domain. It was like a system. No, it should be said that it was more than a system. Thinking of this, even Yishuan, who had always been bold, felt incomparably shocked. If it was really as he had speculated, then the entire history of the Fortune God dynasty would be rewritten. These people all thought that they had seen the true face of the world, but was it really like this? According to the historical records of the Fortune Divine dynasty, the earliest records were from the wilderness era. In that era, foreign creatures ran amok in all directions, and the people of the Fortune Divine dynasty trembled in fear under the ferocity of these foreign creatures. It was not until the appearance of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch that the situation finally changed. Although the history of the Fortune God dynasty was divided into countless segments, in general, it could be divided into the Desolate era and the Fortune God dynasty era. But now it seemed that there were other secrets that no one knew. The two of them had their own thoughts, but their speed wasn't slow. The deeper they went, the more they felt the pressure. Heavenly venerables could still endure it, but if it was an emperor, they would probably not be able to endure it. The deeper they went, the more corpses of peak emperors there were. It was almost like a huge battlefield, but those who were qualified to enter this huge battlefield were existences above the emperor level. Quasi-emperors were not even qualified to get close. Soon, they came to the end of the road, and there was a boundless sea. What surprised them was that even with their skills and eyesight, they could not see through this sea and see the situation on the other side. Yishiwen looked around and saw that the entire sea was filled with an incomparably strange feeling. The entire sea was calm and tranquil. Not even a single wave could be seen. It was so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. The Sea of the Dead, Taoist friend Wu Zun, we have finally arrived at the Sea of the Dead. After crossing this Sea of the Dead, we will reach the land of fortune. The war god revealed a smile on his face and said quickly, "The Sea of the Dead?" Yishiwen asked, "And it is said that this sea existed before the creation of the world. Even a celestial master cannot cross it directly. No one can fly on it. If you want to cross it, you must wait for a ferry and go there by ferry." The war god explained. Chapter 3392. Ferry. Yishiwen was a little curious. He had been in closed-door training all this time, so he didn't understand a lot of information. Yes, in this boundless sea of the dead, there is a ferry. It has been floating in this sea of the dead since ancient times. If we want to cross the sea, we can only cross it. Who is ferrying it? Yishiwen asked. Since there was a ferry, there should be someone ferrying it. If there had been someone ferrying it since ancient times, then the thought of the ferryman was a little creepy. There is no one ferryman. In fact, since the first time this ferry was discovered in historical records, there's been no one ferryman. It is just that this ferry will automatically travel to and fro in the Sea of the Dead. The Zhanzun shook his head and said. He also felt a little cold on his back. No one ferryman was more terrifying than a ferryman. With his cultivation, it was not difficult to make a ferry cross the starry sky for thousands of years, but in this Sea of the Dead, it was a different matter. Not even Empyreans could fly through the Sea of the Dead. Not only could they not fly over, but they also couldn't touch the seawater. Otherwise, why would they bother waiting for this ferry? It was because of this that the ferry gave off a strange feeling no matter how one looked at it. Although he hadn't seen it yet, it was enough to make some judgments from the records. No one ferryman? Yishiwen's expression was a little dignified, but he didn't pay too much attention to it. Although he felt that there must be various hidden reasons, since countless people had crossed the Sea of the Dead since ancient times, it showed that there must be a pattern in it. If there were traces to follow, it wouldn't be that scary. The two approached the Sea of the Dead, and soon felt the strangeness of the Sea of the Dead. Neither of them had ever seen a calm sea without the slightest ripple. Yishiwen looked down and suddenly saw a young man in a green robe sitting alone in the forest. His eyes were a little sluggish, looking at his hands from time to time, as if he still couldn't believe it. It was the scene when he had just crossed over. The scene changed quickly. This young man in a green robe unexpectedly obtained that mysterious space. His cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, and he won first place in the sub-sect. He became famous in the main sect. The scene changed faster and faster, and more lives were reflected. Oomph! Yishiwen coldly snorted. Suddenly, the scene in front of him disappeared. It was still the same yellow water surface. It still looked like an ancient well without any ripples. The surface of the Sea of the Dead can reflect Ren's life? Yishiwen thought of many legends about the world of the dead. No matter what kind of illustrious existence they were during their lifetime, they would be punished after death. The good ones would ascend to heaven, and the evil ones would go to hell. There would be no trace of bias. Something's wrong. Yishiwen immediately reacted. Although there seemed to be nothing wrong, this was the biggest mistake. What kind of cultivation did he have? He had personally entered the River of Destiny when he had entered the Emperor realm and killed his past. Therefore, he was a person without a past. Even his past had vanished into thin air. How could anything possibly reflect his past? This was the power of extreme powerhouses. Without a past, they would not be used by others. They would not be calculated by others. Even their weaknesses would not be grasped by others. The future existed based on the past. People without a past naturally did not have a fixed future. Therefore, no one could calculate his future. For example, he could calculate a mortal's life from his birth to his death in the blink of an eye. However, It was absolutely impossible for anyone to calculate his future. Since there was no past, how could anyone calculate his past and reflect his life? This was the most impossible thing in itself. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen's eyes instantly became clear. He would not be affected by this strange scene. He looked to the side again. The warlord was also immersed in it. After a while, he finally figured out the crux of it and woke up. Feeling Yi Shiwen's gaze, he could not help but smile a little embarrassedly and said, "I only read the records from the ancient books. This sea of the dead can reflect one's life. Although I know it's an illusion, I still couldn't help but look and even immerse myself in it." Yi Shiwen smiled and did not say anything. With the wisdom of a celestial master, ordinary illusions would not work at all. Even if it was an illusion cast by another celestial master, it was also impossible to make other celestial masters fall for it in an instant. The eyes of a celestial master were the eyes of a Dharma master. It was easy to remove the false and retain the true. Obviously, this sea of the dead was strange. Even he fell for it. Why did he have to laugh at others? Although he only saw through it for a moment and became clear-headed. "Let's go. We shouldn't wait here. Let's go directly to the ferry. I think Celestial Master Great Sun and Undying Evil Master should have already gone there," said the warlord. If there was a ferry, there would naturally be a ferry. However, when Yi Shiwen saw this ferry, he could not help but feel his facial muscles cramp a little. This ferry was dilapidated beyond recognition. There were traces of corrosion everywhere. The wood that formed the ferry was completely rotten. It seemed as if people could not stand on it. As long as someone stood on it, it would immediately collapse. However, according to the warlord, this ferry had been like this since ancient times. There was no difference. And not far from the ferry, the figures of Undying Evil Master and Celestial Master Great Sun were indeed there. However, they were facing Yi Shiwen from distance. They did not come near, nor did they go far. Obviously, the two of them were also waiting for the ferry to arrive. When Celestial Master Great Sun saw Yi Shiwen's arrival, his eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. He was very confident, but he did not dare to ignore old ancestor Purple Scorpion's words. However, Yi Shiwen's expression was indifferent. He had no intention of launching a sneak attack. This made him slightly relieved. Then, he became even more furious. He had already thought it through. Yi Shiwen was afraid of Undying Evil Master, who was beside him. This made him feel that it was a huge blow to his self-esteem. The two of them were facing each other from a distance. They were originally two completely opposing camps. Even if they wanted to cooperate, they would not be too close to each other for fear of a sneak attack. Suddenly, a fog suddenly appeared on the originally calm and tranquil sea surface. The fog quickly pervaded the entire sea surface, and even Yi Shiwen and the others couldn't see through it with their eyes. "It's here. The ferry is here. This fog is a sign," said the warlord. Celestial Master Great Sun and Undying Evil Master's expressions turned serious. Sure enough, it didn't take long for a huge ferry to appear in front of the two sides. But this ship was quite huge. Looking from afar, it looked like a small mountain. This size, how could it be called a ferry? It was simply no worse than an aircraft carrier in Yi Shiwen's previous life. It was just that this wooden ferry was tattered everywhere, and one could even see a large hole in it, as if it could sink at any time. However, it was this ferry that had been traversing the sea of the dead since ancient times, ferrying people to and fro. "Come, let's go up," Yi Shiwen said. Before his voice fell, his figure had already flown out. In an instant, it was as if he had teleported. He had shrunk the ground to an inch and directly swept onto the boat. Although he could not fly, his physical strength was still there. If not for this strange sea, under normal circumstances, his physical strength would be enough to cross a galaxy without any difficulty. The warlord also followed closely behind and boarded the boat. On the other side of the boat, Undying Evil Master and Celestial Master Great Sun also boarded the big boat. The big boat only paused for a moment before turning around and sailing towards the other side of the endless Dead Sea. The huge boat was inconspicuous in this boundless sea, like a small fish. Apart from the sound of the boat cutting through the sea, There was only the creaking sound of the boat's planks. Both sides tacitly did not speak. They just sat cross-legged and waited for the boat to dock. Suddenly, Yishuin opened his eyes and looked around, releasing his divine senses. Just a moment ago, Yishuin suddenly felt a burst of cold feeling behind him, as if something extremely gloomy and cold was crawling around him. What's wrong? The warlord was also awakened by Yishuin's actions. At this moment, everyone saw that in the fog on the sea, a huge figure appeared around them, moving along with the hull of the boat. A big guy is coming. Yishuin stood up and looked into the distance. He could vaguely see that huge figure. The others also stood up one after another. Obviously, they had also discovered this huge figure at this time. Everyone's skills were raised to the peak, ready to fight at any time. They were all Celestial Master level experts, so naturally, they would not be easily frightened. The ship continued to move forward, but it was still shrouded in the endless fog. Rather than saying that the fog came from the surface of the sea, it was more accurate to say that it shrouded the hull of the ship. Wherever the ferry went, the fog would envelop that area. This boat sailed for a full day and night, finally seeing the other side of the shore. It was a boundless continent, the sea level and the sky level spreading out endlessly. The figure that had been surrounding the boat did not pounce on it in the end, as if it was afraid of something. It just kept circling around the hull of the boat. Let's go. As soon as the boat reached the shore, their figures shot out like a sharp arrow. As soon as they stepped on the shore, their magic power recovered at the same time, and they turned into streams of light and flew out. Let's go, we'll go east. The warlord followed behind Yishuin and said, on the boat, he had already explained to Yishuin that the Celestial Masters they wanted to rescue were on the east coast of this continent. Although they had all come here, those Celestial Masters were also divided into camps. The Celestial Masters of the Fortune God Dynasty were in the east, and the Celestial Masters of the Foreign Domain were in the west. Each was different. Chapter 33:93. The Heavenly Venerables of the Fortune God Dynasty and the Outer Domain each stood on one side, dividing the entire continent. Yishuin's eyesight reached the deepest part of the continent. A group of light illuminated the entire continent. It looked like a sun. However, Yishuin could see that it wasn't a sun. Instead, it was a space channel. The light that was being emitted wasn't ordinary light. Instead, it was the light that was formed from the fluctuations of the principles. The fluctuations of the laws could be seen with the naked eye. It wasn't something that ordinary Emperor Lords could see. It was a deeper level of the laws. Only heavenly venerables could understand it. Only those who had comprehended the laws could understand the principles behind the light formed by the fluctuations of the laws. I can actually see the fluctuations of the laws with the naked eye. I don't even need to integrate with my body to be able to see them. Yishuin couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. No wonder those heavenly venerables are willing to cultivate here. Cultivating here is simply twice the result with half the effort. One's cultivation will definitely progress by leaps and bounds. That's right, it is indeed so. These fluctuations of the laws are transmitted through that space channel. On the other side of the channel is the legendary land of fortune, a place where good fortune is hidden, said the war elder. Since ancient times, only the Fortune Heavenly Monarch had entered the Fortune Divine Dynasty. He obtained good fortune from the Fortune Divine Dynasty and established its current supreme foundation. It's a pity that we can't stay here for long without the real good fortune key. The war elder couldn't help but sigh regretfully. He had now stepped into the Heavenly Venerate realm and felt that cultivating in the Heavenly Venerate realm was simply too difficult. If he hadn't accumulated countless years of experience, he would still be stabilizing his Heavenly Venerate realm. He wouldn't be able to be mentioned in the same breath as when he was a peak Emperor Lord. He would be standing on a completely different level. If he could cultivate here for a long time, it could be said that the road to cultivation would yield twice the result with half the effort. This was also the reason why many Heavenly Venerables had stayed here to cultivate since ancient times. However, with the loss of the good fortune key, this place had become a prison for them. Moreover, they had been imprisoned for countless years. How sad was this? The continent was huge. Here, the consciousness of heavenly venerables couldn't be used, as if it was restricted by something. However, the path of fortune itself was full of mysteries. It was normal for there to be many secrets that ordinary people couldn't pry into. Yishuan and the Zhanzun explored along the way. Soon, they found the first figure. The Zhanzun instinctively stopped when he saw this figure. He almost retreated and ran away. This was because the person they saw was none other than Heavenly Venerate Misty Cloud. Even now, the War Supremacy still remembered the scene of Heavenly Venerate Cloud's clones unleashing a massacre the last time they entered the path of creation. Heavenly Venerables were killed in groups like they were grass. Of the Heavenly Venerables of the Heavenly Venerables. And Misty Cloud Empyrean was one of the best among them. Even Huang Xiaolong had almost fallen into Misty Cloud Empyrean's trap. Saying that they were both from the Fortune Divine Dynasty was nonsense. Heavenly Venerables were the best of the best. Even the War Elder had almost fallen for Heavenly Venerable's tricks. It didn't matter if he was just a beginner or a peak Emperor. Now that he had truly become a Heavenly Venerate, he realized how ridiculous it had been for him to think that a Heavenly Venerate would think highly of him just because he was a peak Sovereign Emperor. Whether he had just advanced to the Sovereign Emperor realm or was a peak Sovereign Emperor, it was nothing before a Heavenly Venerate. If he was in this situation, he probably wouldn't show the slightest bit of leniency when dealing a killing blow. Yishuan didn't have any psychological trauma. At that time, his strength was already above that of Heavenly Venerable's incarnation. Therefore, he wasn't abused or chased away like a stray dog. As the two approached, Heavenly Venerable's cloud opened her beautiful eyes. There was a surprised look on her stunning face. She opened her red lips and said, "You guys?" Obviously, she still remembered these two people, especially Yi Shiwen, who left a deep impression on her. Among the Emperor Kings, there is only one person who could cultivate to such a level and be so tyrannical that he could retreat calmly from the incarnations of several great heavenly masters. Since ancient times, there was only one person who could do so. She had seen countless outstanding people in her life, but she had never seen anyone as impressive as Yi Shiwen. She hadn't been seen before she entered the path of creation, so she should have been a rising star who had appeared later on. However, it had only been 10,000 years since then, and that shocking and brilliant emperor had actually stepped into the celestial lord realm. Moreover, not only that, but she had even reached the second realm. Her eyes were so sharp that she could see Shiwen's cultivation at a glance. Although Yi Shiwen had concealed it very well, there was still a huge gap between their realms. However, she could only see Yi Shiwen's cultivation realm. As for how strong he was, she couldn't calculate it. Even so, it was enough to shock her. She still remembered how long it took her to enter the second realm from the first realm. In front of this person, she seemed to be overshadowed. Heavenly Venerable's Cloud, we have come under the orders of the Fortune God Dynasty to rescue you from the path of creation. At this time, the War Venerable stepped forward and said, although he was shocked by her at first, he quickly calmed down. He was now in the Heavenly Venerable's realm. Heavenly Venerable's Cloud had been trapped for many years. She might not be as powerful as him. You have found the Fate Key? Heavenly Venerable's Cloud frowned slightly and asked, no, it shouldn't be. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to do this. The Fortune Divine Dynasty spent countless years to forge a replica of the Fortune Key. Although it is not as good as the real Fortune Key, it is more than enough to break the shackles on everyone's body and rescue everyone from the path of fortune. The War Venerables explained. So that was how it was. In that case, I owe you a favor. Heavenly Venerable's Cloud was not a pretentious person, so she immediately said. At this time, she slightly operated her magic power. A light purple enchantment appeared around her. It was formed by the nomological power of the entire path of creation. It was not man-made. Otherwise, with Heavenly Venerable's Cloud's strength, she would not have been trapped for so many years. Because human strength was limited, but the power of heaven was endless. If it was man-made, it could be broken sooner or later. However, if it was naturally formed by heaven, it would be very difficult to break. Yishuin and the war venerables glanced at each other and then moved at the same time. With the help of external forces, this enchantment was much easier to break. In just a short time, it was broken by the two of them. Heavenly Venerable's cloud finally broke free and said faintly, "This time, I owe you a favor. If you need anything in the future, you can come to the northern region to find me." Yishuin and the war venerables had only moved a little, and they had made a Heavenly Venerables owe them a favor. No wonder this matter was so popular and sought after. They would probably obtain a lot of benefits from this. "It was nothing. You don't have to be so polite," Yishuin said. "However, I have something to ask you. Go ahead. As long as I know, I will tell you everything I know." Heavenly Venerable's cloud flew in front of the two of them and said, although she had broken free, she was still in an unprecedentedly weak state. This was because there was no spiritual energy in the path of creation. Spiritual energy could only exist by relying on nomological laws. However, in the path of creation, the nomological laws had become tangled and difficult to take shape. Therefore, she had no way to recover. She would have to wait until she left the path of creation to recover. Fortunately, after leaving the enchantment, she would not be unable to maintain a certain level of strength like she was in the enchantment. She could only continue to weaken and eventually die from exhaustion of blood. As a Heavenly Venerables of the Fortune God dynasty, she would not have believed that one day she would face the threat of death like this and die from exhaustion of blood. I just want to ask, do you know where the Emperor Primordial Chaos who attacked with you last time is? Yishuin asked. The Emperor Primordial Chaos. Heavenly Venerable's cloud frowned slightly. We took turns to attack. It was a last resort in order to survive. According to everyone's tacit understanding, the Outer Domain and the Fortune God dynasty would each take half of the blood. Moreover, they would take turns to send out their incarnations to harvest the blood. Last time, I went with the Emperor Primordial Chaos. However, he is a Heavenly Venerate from the Outer Domain and not a Heavenly Venerate of the Fortune God dynasty. Therefore, he should be in the Outer Domain now and not here. Based on her words, she only treated those powerful Emperor Primordial Chaos as blood. Of course, she would not eat them alive like wild beasts. She just had other means. So, it's a Heavenly Venerate from the Outer Domain. Yishuin suddenly came to a realization. No wonder he couldn't find any information about the Emperor Primordial Chaos, even though he had been in the Fortune God dynasty for so long. He had originally thought that the Emperor Primordial Chaos had been trapped in the path of fortune for too long. Therefore, there were no legends or records about him in this world. But now, it seemed that this was not the case. He was actually a Heavenly Venerate from the Outer Domain. No wonder, Yishuin said. Why? Does fellow Taoist have a grudge with the Emperor Primordial Chaos? Empyrean Cloud Mist glanced at Yishuin with her beautiful eyes, and then her lips parted slightly as she asked. She was naturally able to tell that when Yishuin mentioned Emperor Primordial Chaos, it didn't seem as if he was reuniting with an old friend. Instead, his words carried a bit of unforgettable hatred. There is indeed a grudge that needs to be settled, Yishuin said with a cold smile. Thank you for your guidance, fellow Taoist. Since fellow Taoist has already escaped, you could go straight to the ferry. When we rescue the others, we will go there together. Yishuin said. I understand. Heavenly Venerable's cloud, Miss said. Then, Yishuin turned to Warlord and said, Fellow Taoist Warlord, I will be leaving for a while. You go and rescue the others first. Chapter 3394. Zhanzun looked at Yishuin helplessly. How many celestial venerables did Yishuin offend? First, it was Sky Fire Divine Venerable, then this Emperor Hunyuan. One must know that Yishuin was only an Emperor Lord at that time. He might not even be an Emperor Lord. At least, Emperor Hunyuan had been trapped in the path of creation for many years. However, Yishuin was still offended to the point where he had to be killed. This was a bit too bad, assess. He had rarely seen such a situation in his life. Imperial emperors rarely had the opportunity to offend celestial venerables because they were not on the same level at all. They rarely interacted with each other. Furthermore, many imperial emperors would often maintain a kind of respect for celestial venerables. How could they offend them so easily? Moreover, those who offended celestial masters would have been slapped to death by celestial masters. They would not have the chance to jump around here. Obviously, Yi Shiwen was the kind of person who offended celestial masters and was still alive and kicking. Moreover, Yi Shiwen killed the sky-devouring Demon King before, which aroused the disgust of all the celestial masters. Even so, he was not forced to die. Instead, he was still alive and kicking until now. Now that he thought about it, it was a miracle that he was still alive after offending so many celestial masters. Of course, no problem, but you'd better go and return quickly, the War Master said. For him, there was no problem. Anyway, if Yi Shiwen did not make a move, he would be the one who owed him a favor. I will. It won't take long, Yi Shiwen said lightly. Misty Cloud glanced at Yi Shiwen in surprise. Yi Shiwen's confidence wasn't ordinary. Not long. She was able to discern that Yi Shiwen was probably going to fight Imperial Monarch Han Yuan to the death. Even though she didn't know exactly what sort of enmity existed between them, it was probably not a small one. Under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen still dared to say that he would be able to return in a short period of time. It seemed that people who had been trapped here for many years were really underestimated. After thinking for a moment, he finally opened his mouth and said, "Don't underestimate him too much. Although you destroyed his clone last time, he still captured quite a few people and recovered some of his vitality. He's not as easy to deal with as you think." "Thank you for the reminder," Yi Shiwen said. "Then, I'll leave first." Then, Yi Shiwen's figure took a big stride and flew out. He stepped on a golden light and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Even though he knows this, he still dares to go like this. Does he really have something to rely on? Celestial Master Vast Cloud muttered to himself. Then, he turned around and left. The War Supremacy didn't hesitate and continued to search. This continent was too big, and he couldn't expand his divine sense. Fortunately, he had the list of heavenly venerates that had fallen here. Otherwise, he might really have missed it. Yi Shiwen headed straight for the Western continent after obtaining the accurate information of Emperor Primordial Chaos. Although he had a general direction, it wasn't easy to find Emperor Primordial Chaos. Whether it was Undying Evil Venerable or Great Sun Heavenly Venerable, their speed was very fast. Yi Shiwen could still see some traces of restrictions along the way, but he didn't see any Heavenly Venerables from other domains. Obviously, they had all been rescued. Soon, according to the pattern of the places where the outer domain celestial masters were trapped, Yi Shiwen figured out their pattern of rescuing people. He immediately deduced their route of advance and immediately rushed in the direction of the deduction. Soon, he bumped into a group of heavenly venerables who had just been liberated. Yes, it wasn't just one person, but a group of outer domain celestial masters. Among them, there was Emperor Primordial Chaos who had just been freed. Although he had been trapped for many years, he still had the demeanor of an overlord of generation. He was like a dragon and a tiger, with a majesty that looked down on the world. A heavenly venerable level expert, even if he had been trapped for many years, would not show the slightest weakness. However, this Emperor Primordial Chaos was just one of this group of heavenly venerables. As soon as Yi Shiwen's figure appeared, it immediately attracted the attention of these heavenly venerables. Which of these heavenly venerables hadn't reached the heavenly venerable realm for countless years? Naturally, they weren't ordinary people. They immediately became vigilant. This was also the reason why it was possible to bump into each other in this place. Because both sides were in the dark, the effect of divine sense was reduced to the minimum. Heavenly Master of the Fortune God Dynasty. A Heavenly Master immediately recognized Yi Shiwen. At their level of cultivation, unless Yi Shiwen deliberately concealed himself, it was too easy to determine which camp he belonged to at their level of cultivation. "It's you," Emperor Primordial Chaos' eyes widened immediately because he was too familiar with Yishuan. In the myriad heavens, the two of them had fought more than once or twice. However, the myriad heavens was Yishuan's territory. He was the reigning Emperor Primordial Chaos. He had the favor of the heavenly Tao, so he occupied all the advantages. Except for a few times when he had not become an emperor, he had made Yishuan quite embarrassed. After becoming an emperor, the situation between the two of them had been completely reversed. Yishuan, who had the geographical advantage and was also a reigning Emperor Primordial Chaos, had the upper hand in all aspects. Emperor Primordial Chaos couldn't do anything to Yishuan in several battles. Moreover, the chess pieces that he had arranged in the myriad heavens over the years were also removed one by one during Yishuan's many years of governance. It could be said that the arrangements that he had made in the myriad heavens over the years were completely destroyed by Yishuan. After that, on the path of creation, Yishuan was seriously injured by him and escaped, almost dying tragically. Emperor Primordial Chaos could be considered to have won the game. But soon, when he saw Yishuan again, Yishuan already had the ability to destroy his doppelganger in less than 10,000 years. Even Emperor Primordial Chaos was stunned by Yishuan's rapid progress. But what was even more terrifying was that after another 10,000 years, Yishuan had actually advanced into the heavenly venerable realm. This speed of progress was simply shocking. If it was in the myriad heavens, he could understand why Yishuan's progress was faster. As the first Emperor Primordial Chaos after Emperor Qin, he must have received the favor of the heavenly Tao of the myriad heavens. He was the so-called son of destiny, so it was normal for his progress to be faster. However, in the myriad heavens, there was a limit to one's progress. It was impossible to progress forever. This was also why Yishuan obeyed the call of his heart and jumped out of the myriad heavens. But after entering the creation realm, Yishuan's progress was not slow at all. This was what made Emperor Primordial Chaos most afraid. In an instant, Emperor Primordial Chaos understood many things. A sharp killing intent emerged in his eyes. Killing intent had already been born in his heart. If it was only the first time he heard about Yishuan's battle achievements, he might be able to endure it, because he also wanted to restore his own strength first. He had absolute confidence that if he recovered, he would definitely break through faster than Yishuan. Then he could go to the outside world and slaughter wantonly and devour a huge amount of blood essence. He would be able to improve in a short period of time, and it would not be too late to kill Yishuan then. But this time was different. Yishuan had actually appeared here, and his entire body was filled with killing intent. Wasn't it already obvious who he was targeting? Since Yishuan had come to kill him, there was no way out for him. He could only fight to the death. The heavenly venerables were not fools. Almost immediately, they determined that Yishuan's target was Emperor Primordial Chaos. Naturally, they were not in the mood to help Emperor Primordial Chaos fight Yishuan. Although a faction confrontation was one thing, they were after all not at their peak. If they were at their peak, any one of them could easily suppress Yishuan. It was a pity that things were not as good as people. It was inevitable. Yishuan also did not expect to bump into so many heavenly venerables. Clearly, they had all been rescued by heavenly venerable Great Sun and undying evil venerable. At this time, they were together, heading in the direction of the ferry to wait for it to leave. Everyone, this child is a newly ascended heavenly venerable of the Fortune God dynasty, just in time to kill him and devour his blood essence. Isn't that much stronger than those Emperor Lords? Emperor Primordial Chaos said sinisterly. In the blink of an eye, he had sent Yishuan to the position of a target for everyone. The eyes of many Empyreans lit up when they heard this. They had once relied on killing Empyreans and devouring their life, source energy, and blood essence to survive. Although they had already broken free, the habits they had built up over the years in Hidden Sun City wouldn't disappear so easily. If it was just one of them, they might not have much confidence in taking down Yishuan. But if all of them joined forces, the outcome was obvious. They were all old ancestors who had fought for many years. At their peak, Each of them was a powerful figure who could run amok in a region. Naturally, there was nothing to be afraid of. Apprehension was ultimately just apprehension. However, he should be the same as undying evil venerable and heavenly venerable great Sunday. He was sent by the fortune god dynasty to rescue people. If we kill him here, we will be in the fortune god capital when we get out. Will those people in the fortune god capital be willing to let this matter rest? Suddenly, a heavenly venerable voiced out the doubt in his heart. If they were in their peak state, they could still protect themselves. But now they were not at their peak state. Moreover, they were in a place like the fortune god capital that was filled with traps. If the fortune god dynasty was determined to keep them here, then it was hard to guarantee that some of them wouldn't die. It would be fine if it was others, but if it was them, then the gains would not make up for the losses. Wait until we kill him and devour his life source and blood essence. Our strength will recover a lot. There are so many of us here, and we have already fought our way out. What is there to be afraid of? A heavenly venerable said indifferently. His upper body was no different from human, but his lower body was that of a snake. He looked extremely fierce, and his entire body exuded a blazing light. Although he did not look mighty, he had a dignified demeanor. His eyes were as deep as the galaxy, and from time to time, purple lightning would burst out, cutting through the starry sky and shaking the galaxy. It was unknown when he had moved behind Yishiwen, sealing off Yishiwen's path of retreat. He was standing in front of Emperor Primordial Chaos, and they cooperated with each other. Although they had never worked together before, with their cultivation, many things did not need to be said out loud to be understood. Chapter 33:95. Everyone thought about it and agreed that it was true. Trying to break into the divine capital of fortune alone was no different from seeking death. However, if everyone attacked together, even if they were not at their peak, they could still rush out of the divine capital of fortune. There was nothing to be afraid of. If that's the case, count me in. Suddenly, an incomparably huge beast stood out and surrounded Yishiwen. This beast was covered with long hair and was the size of a small mountain. It had a ferocious face and fangs, but there was a fearful aura coming from its body. The celestial masters of Beastao were extremely terrifying and powerful. Boom! All of a sudden, another heavenly sovereign stood out. However, this heavenly sovereign wasn't in his original body. Instead, he was sealed within an immortal stone. His original body could be vaguely seen within the immortal stone, but it was clear that he was heavily injured. That was why he was sealed within the immortal stone. The others looked at each other, but in the end, they did not intend to get involved with these four people. Instead, they retreated and retreated. If they could get out safely, they were even more unwilling to take risks. The four people, including the primordial Chaos Emperor, surrounded Yishiwen and completely sealed him in their domain. Ha! Good, Feathered Serpent Master, Mad Beast Master, Innocent Sage, let's join forces and kill this boy today. Not only can we devour his blood essence and life source, but he also has a lot of wealth. We have been trapped for many years, and our wealth has long been exhausted. We can replenish a lot. The primordial Chaos Emperor laughed loudly. Originally, he was still a little afraid of Yishiwen, but now he had nothing to fear. No matter how strong Yishiwen was, it was impossible to compete with four powerful celestial masters. No one could do it. Even if they were not at their peak, they were still supreme existences that ordinary people had to look up to. If one underestimated them because of this, then one would not be far from death. Facing the four people from the front and back, Yishiwen stood still and said indifferently, "Have you all really thought it through? I'll give you one more chance. It's not too late for you to retreat now. This time, the divine capital of fortune is a joint rescue operation with the outer domain, so I won't attack you. But if you're still with him, then don't blame me for being impolite. You can't blame others if you die." Ha, kid. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak like this in front of me? If it was in the past, I would have killed someone like you with a single slap. The feathered serpent sovereign laughed out loud and said coldly, His eyes instantly became as cold as a snake's, incomparably sinister. The others also remained calm and collected. They weren't affected by Yi Shiwen's words at all. They were the most tyrannical existences in the world in the past. Each and every one of them was invincible in the past. So, how could they be scared by Yi Shiwen's words? On the contrary, they felt that Yi Shiwen was overestimating his capabilities. Even those heavenly venerables from other domains who hadn't joined in the siege felt that Yi Shiwen was too rampant. He had dared to speak in such a manner in front of them. The words of venerable feathered serpent weren't wrong. If someone had dared to clamor in front of them in the past, then that person would have died. In the past. You said it was in the past. Do you think you're still the same as before? Yi Shiwen sneered. He might have avoided venerable feathered serpent in the past. However, he didn't have the slightest fear now. They were just some old dogs who had been trapped for many years. How dare they attack him? They really didn't know how they died. Since you all want to die, then don't blame me. Even those old guys from other domains have nothing to say. Yi Shiwen said coldly. Kid, you're really courting death. Venerable feathered serpent sovereign suddenly moved. A burst of strong aura erupted from his body. His huge serpent tail fiercely swung towards Yi Shiwen. Everyone, hurry up and finish this quickly. Venerable feathered serpent sovereign obviously knew that they had been trapped for many years. They couldn't get any replenishment of their chi and blood. It wouldn't be a problem for a while if they really fought. However, they wouldn't be able to exhaust Yi Shiwen's chi and blood if it continued. If they were in the outside world, there wouldn't be any problems. They could absorb the essence of heaven and earth while recovering. However, in this path of creation, all their consumption couldn't be replenished. Their last bit of resources had long been exhausted in this endless imprisonment. This serpent tail was extremely terrifying. It was shining with the brilliance of the Great Way. He had actually refined his body into a Tao tool. At this moment, it suddenly erupted with terrifying power. In an instant, it shattered the sky and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's body finally moved. Similarly, he blasted out a punch. This punch directly reversed the river of time. Wherever this punch passed, time was rolled up and reversed. The whole scene looked incomparably terrifying. This was the first time he had used his full strength after stepping into the second stage of Heavenly Master Realm. Before this, he hadn't used his full strength at all when he defeated Great Sun Heavenly Master. Now it was the time for him to use his full strength. Boom! There was a loud bang. Yi Shiwen's body didn't move at all. He forcibly withstood this terrifying blow. Although he was facing a super big shot who was once invincible, Yi Shiwen didn't retreat at all. He was still domineering and unparalleled in the world. What a powerful junior. He's really amazing. He forcibly withstood venerable feathered serpent's attack with his physical body. At this moment, many heavenly masters only felt that their eyes lit up. Yi Shiwen's performance was indeed qualified to make their eyes light up. It wasn't the kind of situation where he would collapse with a single blow. A little interesting, but it's useless. You still have to die. A loud voice came, followed by a huge claw from the sky. It directly slammed down as if it could cover the entire sky. This was Venerable Mad Beast's attack. His strength was extremely terrifying. He once commanded the beast Tao. His origin was mysterious, but his cultivation was extremely terrifying. Back then, he was invincible in the world. Almost no one could stop him. If he hadn't entered the path of creation to cultivate, perhaps not many people would be his opponent. The devil wings on Yi Shiwen's body suddenly swelled up and suddenly protected him inside. The claw grabbed the devil wings, and unexpectedly, a sound of metal clashing rang out, and a burst of sparks splashed in all directions. Venerable Mad Beast's claw didn't break Yi Shiwen's demon wings. Die! A spear pierced through the void. It was Emperor Primordius who had made his move. His chi and blood also began to surge. He wasn't at his peak, so he didn't dare to casually burn his chi and blood like Yi Shiwen. But this time, he also understood that delaying was definitely not the best idea. He could only kill Yi Shiwen as soon as possible in order to eliminate any future troubles. The last time they met, Yi Shiwen already had the opportunity to break through to the Heavenly Master Realm. Such a breakthrough speed made him feel extremely fearful. Whoosh! The spear directly penetrated Yi Shiwen's body, but it was just an illusion. Emperor Hun Yuan, it's time to end the tens of thousands of years of grievances between us. I said last time that you're just an old dog who has cultivated for a few more years than me. As long as I have time. Killing you is like slaughtering a chicken or a dog. Unbeknownst to him, Yi Shiwen had already arrived behind Emperor Primordius. He clenched his fist, and in an instant, it seemed as if he was holding the entire world in his hand, condensing it into his fist. Then, he fiercely smashed it down like a thunderbolt. Want to sneak attack me? Emperor Hun Yuan's big hand suddenly stretched out, directly grabbed the spear, and then suddenly pulled it back. He turned around and stabbed, directly colliding with Yi Shiwen's fist. Clang! An incomparably loud explosion sounded, and the collision between the two caused the whole world to violently collide with each other. Thump, thump, thump. Emperor Hun Yuan finally couldn't stabilize his body, and he kept retreating. He almost couldn't hold on and was blasted away. What a tyrannical body. This was the first time Emperor Hun Yuan's main body fought with Yi Shiwen, and it was the first time he felt the astonishing strength of Yi Shiwen's body. Chapter 3396. Yi Shiwen's fist energy was overwhelming. The fist energy was like a knife, and it immediately broke the big net of the law in the sky. The big net formed by these law-divine chains was incomparably strong and endless. It manifested from the void at any time, reformed, and then constantly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen constantly rushed and killed in it. The power of his fists was unparalleled. Just a pair of fists was enough to create a world. In just a few breaths of time, Yi Shiwen had destroyed these divine chains that had been transformed from the principles on the spot. However, it still gave Emperor Primordius enough time to retreat out of Yi Shiwen's attack range. At this time, he really tasted the meaning of the old saying, "The fist is afraid of the strong young." Yi Shiwen's reckless fighting style seemed to be nothing. It was even a little reckless, but it was the fighting style that he was most afraid of. This kid is extremely tricky. Let's join forces and attack together. Venerable Feathered Serpent roared and directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. His body was like a galaxy, dazzling, exuding a terrifying light, and suddenly swept towards Yi Shiwen. He launched the most terrifying attack at Yi Shiwen. His terrifying aura spread out, causing the world to tremble. You're courting death. Yi Shiwen had no choice but to retreat. He turned around and kicked out. This kick was like a lightning tearing the sky. It was extremely terrifying, and it almost turned the world upside down. Bang! Yi Shiwen's kick collided with the huge snake tail of Venerable Feathered Serpent. The power was infinite, but it was no different from Emperor Primordius. Venerable Feathered Serpent could not directly compete with Yi Shiwen's body. His chi and blood were too little, and he would be at a disadvantage if he directly collided with Yi Shiwen. The huge tail curled back at a speed faster than when it came. On the other side, the incomparably powerful Mad Beast Lord also rushed over. However, this time, Yi Shiwen had already rushed over before he could reach Yi Shiwen. Good. You dare to counterattack me? Mad Beast Lord only felt that his dignity was being challenged, and he was extremely angry. But it was useless. Yi Shiwen's counterattack was too fast. The Beast Dao domain that he released could not stop Yi Shiwen at all. Countless fierce beasts ran in the Beast Dao domain and tried to counterattack Yi Shiwen. However, in just a moment, they were killed by Yi Shiwen with a slap. His entire Beast Dao domain was also torn apart by Yi Shiwen in an instant. Yi Shiwen's hands bloomed with terrifying golden light, and it turned into a sky full of light rain that rolled in all directions. His eyes flickered with a terrifying light. The longer he dragged this out, the more advantageous it would be for him. He could even use his chi and blood to forcefully drag these guys to death. However, as the saying goes, a long night is fraught with dreams. Emperor Primordial Chaos and the others were worried about their insufficient vitality and were not willing to fight for a long time. How could he not be worried about the arrival of Great Sun, Celestial Master, and Undying Evil Master? With Undying Evil Master's strength, even he had to be wary. In this case, he would miss the best opportunity to kill Emperor Primordial Chaos. Not to mention, there were many other heavenly venerables from other domains who were watching the battle from the sidelines. If some of these people suddenly changed their minds and joined the battle, it would undoubtedly create a new obstacle for Yi Shiwen's plan to kill Emperor Primordial Chaos. Because of this, Yi Shiwen decided to break one of his fingers instead of injuring all 10. He would first kill Mad Beast Lord, and then plot other things. Mad Beast Lord regained his composure at this time. He knew that he had to be even calmer when facing such an unparalleled enemy. At this moment, his body was emitting terrifying light, and the entire universe was trembling. Billions of rays of light rushed into the sky and turned into a sky full of light rain. Then, he suddenly transformed into a middle-aged man, and a bone blade appeared in his hand. This bone blade was flickering with incomparably domineering fluctuations. Venerable wild beast, who was suddenly in front of Yi Shiwen, finally mobilized his celestial Lord Dao tool. It was refined with the fangs of his main body as the main material. It took him tens of thousands of years to finally complete it. It had great power. This was his biggest trump card. His face finally revealed a somewhat sinister expression, because he knew very well that Yi Shiwen was just a new heavenly venerable. According to the information passed by Emperor Primordial Chaos, he should have become a heavenly venerable only a mere 10,000 years ago, and should not have enough time to refine his own heavenly venerable Dao tool. A heavenly venerable with or without a heavenly venerable Dao tool was completely different and could not be mentioned in the same breath. The bone blade swept horizontally and vertically, and although it looked smooth, but in fact, there was a terrifying sharpness directly approaching Yi Shiwen's head. A heavenly venerable Dao tool is indeed amazing, but do you think that you can defeat me with this? Yi Shiwen shouted, "You have a heavenly venerable Dao tool, but don't I have one? I'll start with you first. Universe Creation Palm, I'll cripple you with one palm." Yi Shiwen shouted, and the omniscient manifestation hand appeared in his hand. The omniscient manifestation hand made the gesture of a universe creation palm, and suddenly, the power of heaven and earth was under his control. Even the path of creation was no exception, and all of it was integrated into this palm. Then, it formed a terrifying palm force that covered the sky and the earth like quicksilver spilling onto the ground. Boom! There was a terrifying collision sound, and even the heavenly venerables of the foreign domains who were watching felt their hearts palpitate. The collision between the two sides was really frightening, and it was really soul-stirring. The essence of the energy waves that erupted from the battle between the two sides was composed of countless law talismans. It was no longer pure energy, or it could be said that the energy had been organized into such a form. What? Just when everyone was shocked by the attacks of both sides, someone suddenly discovered that Yi Shiwen's palm momentum was not broken by the bone blade at all. This had completely exceeded the expectations of the outer realm heavenly venerates. Many of them still had fresh memories of the terror of the bone blade. Although they were all heavenly venerables of the foreign domains, it wasn't the first time they had fought each other because of various disputes of interests. Therefore, they were very clear about how terrifying this bone blade was. No matter what kind of attack it was, it could be broken completely. However, it was useless in the face of this palm. It was directly blocked, and instead, his own blade momentum was completely broken. Some sharp-eyed people even discovered in horror that his blade momentum was not only broken, but it was also absorbed by Yi Shiwen's palm momentum and turned into his attack. How is this possible? Wild Beast Venerable never expected that his attack would be completely broken in an instant, and Yi Shiwen's universe creation palm's momentum did not decrease, and it fell completely. Boom! This palm directly imprinted on Wild Beast Venerable's body, and his body suddenly flew out like a meteor. He spat out a mouthful of old blood, and it formed a sky full of blood rain. What a strong palm force! Wild Beast Venerable only felt that his whole body was about to collapse. From the previous fight, he had already deduced that Yishiwen's martial power should be around the peak of Heavenly Master Second Realm. Although he didn't know how much stronger the peak of Second Realm was compared to the ordinary peak of Second Realm. It was simply ridiculously strong, but this palm had completely exceeded the limits of his own cultivation. It was almost comparable to the palm of the Third Realm. If he was at his peak, he could naturally take it, but now that he took it head-on, he didn't know how much blood and chi in his body had evaporated. He was severely injured in an instant. The incomparably powerful physical body that he was proud of was directly hit by a huge palm print. It directly imprinted on his chest and almost pierced through his entire body. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he made a prompt decision and retreated repeatedly. Otherwise, he would have been directly pierced through, and even his spirit would have been pulled out. For a moment, countless thoughts emerged in the mind of Wild Beast Venerable. However, for the entire battlefield, only a moment had passed. How could this be? Emperor Hunyuan and the others were instantly shocked because Yishiwen and Wild Beast Venerable had only exchanged one move, and it ended with a huge loss for Wild Beast Venerable. After displaying the Universe Creation Palm, Yishiwen's combat power had increased by a notch. Wild Beast Venerable, who was originally barely able to resist, was suddenly seriously injured. This is the Universe Creation Palm. Emperor Primordial Chaos, Sovereign, immediately recognized the origin of this move. It wasn't difficult to guess. After all, a Heavenly Venerable was different from an Emperor Monarch. Their horizons were broader. So how could they not know about Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch's famous ultimate move? Although they didn't know how Yishiwen knew this long-lost Universe Creation Palm, it was enough to excite them. Didn't they see that Yishiwen's fighting prowess had suddenly increased a lot after he used the Universe Creation Palm? This kind of temptation was already great enough. To these heavenly venerates, a martial art that could greatly increase their combat power was undoubtedly the most attractive. Even though he didn't need to use his toes to think to know that he would definitely have to pay a hefty price. In his opinion, this price was something he could bear. Fellow Taoists, this kid has the Universe Creation Palm. Let's join forces to take him down and divide the Universe Creation Palm equally. How about it? At this moment, Emperor Hunyuan shouted not only to Wild Beast Venerable, Serpent Feather, and the others, but also to the Heavenly Venerables who had yet to join the battle. The Heavenly Venerables were also very tempted when they heard this. It was difficult to be tempted by ordinary martial arts. Even Heavenly Venerables' martial arts were nothing. They were confident that the martial arts they created weren't weaker than others. As long as they fully developed their own martial arts, it would be enough for them to run amok in the world. However, the Universe Creation Palm was different. Chapter 33:97. Many celestial masters began to be tempted. Fate Creation Heavenly Lord was different from ordinary celestial masters. He was above all celestial masters and was the true #1 expert since ancient times. Although he had never said such a thing, this ranking was publicly acknowledged in the Fortune Realm. Even in the outer domain, it was not discounted. The celestial masters of the outer domain were also convinced. Therefore, the martial arts left by Fate Creation Heavenly Lord would attract these super existences. But soon, these super existences denied the temptation in their hearts. If they wanted to participate, they would have done so just now. Since they did not choose to participate, they had their own considerations and could not be easily changed, even if they had wavered at a certain moment just now. However, although they did not make a move in the end, the remaining Feathered Serpent Lord and Sincere Sage were already very tempted. As for Wild Beast Lord, he could not care about these things at this time. Yishiwen's palm almost penetrated him, and he was seriously injured. His chi and blood were insufficient, so his recovery was much slower. If it was in the outside world, Yishuan might not be able to hurt him. Even if he was injured, it would not be to this extent. But now, if he wanted to recover, it was not something that could be done by taking a breath. Want to kill me? You can protect yourself first. Just when Emperor Primordial Chaos was feeling proud of himself, Yishuan suddenly appeared in front of him. After severely injuring Wild Beast Lord in an instant, Yishuan rushed towards Emperor Primordial Chaos without stopping. Die! Yishuan roared and directly struck out with a palm. This palm actually transformed into a human figure, containing his great Tao in it. There was a kind of invincible power, directly rushing up to the sky and slamming down on Emperor Primordial Chaos. Wow, so powerful! The spectating outer domain Empyreans sucked in a breath of cold air. This Yishuan was so powerful. His first move was invincible, and he had integrated his thoughts into his martial arts. This method was extremely terrifying. Was he still a junior? He is indeed just a newcomer, but he is ridiculously strong. There is no one in the second realm who is a match for him. If the Primordial Emperor Lord and the others did not rely on the advantage of their realm, they would not stand a chance in front of him. At this time, a Celestial Master said, "Roar!" In the face of Yishuan's palm strike, Emperor Primordius was not to be outdone. Inside his body, there were chaotic scriptures chanting, as if countless gods were chanting scriptures. Each word turned into a magic tool, igniting the rules and rolling them out. Then, all of them condensed on Emperor Primordius's fist. Boom! With an incomparably loud rumble, Emperor Primordius's fist struck out. Although he was no longer at his peak, and his blood vitality couldn't be compared to his peak, every strike of his still contained a power that could shake the world, a power that made many Empyreans pale in comparison. Many Empyreans could not help but sigh emotionally when they saw this scene. Empyrean Lord Primordius was indeed worthy of being a veteran Empyrean. He was really too tyrannical. The might of this attack was earth-shattering, but it was instantly suppressed by Yishuan's palm. Even the 9 heavens and 10 earths were trembling. Yishuan's palm had blasted out. He was a powerhouse of extreme way, so he should be able to suppress everything. Boom! Emperor Primordius's fist momentum was suddenly dispersed. Then, Yishuan's universe creation palm fell on his body. Like Mad Bee Sovereign, he couldn't resist the power of this palm at all. However, he was better than Mad Bee Sovereign in that he was already prepared, so he wasn't caught off guard. He was only sent flying on the spot. A bloody handprint appeared on his chest. His body was densely covered with cracks, and chaos emerged from them. It was extremely terrifying. Puff! Emperor Primordius, who slammed into the ground of this continent, finally spat out a mouthful of blood. Like Mad Bee Sovereign, he couldn't stop Yishuan's universe creation palm. The universe creation palm is actually this powerful. Emperor Primordius's eyes flickered with a terrifying light, but his expression was still a bit incredulous. Yishuan's palm power was too strong. At this time, he really understood why Mad Bee Sovereign couldn't withstand a single blow under this palm. It wasn't that he was too weak, but Yishuan's strength was too tyrannical. At this time, Yishuan's performance was unparalleled. In just 2 moves, he severely injured 2 great masters. These 2 masters might be powerful existences that ordinary people couldn't imagine in the outside world. These 2 palms consumed a lot of Yishuan's dragon vein in one breath. Compared to the consumption of universe creation palm when he was still a heavenly master, the consumption of the enemy's morale was simply insignificant. It was completely incomparable, but he didn't regret it because he had no other choice. If it was just Emperor Primordial Chaos alone, then the consumption wouldn't have been enough to make him change his mind. But now that there were 4 of them, the consumption would increase exponentially. He had to increase his investment. The feud between him and Emperor Primordius had lasted for tens of thousands of years. It was time to end it. If he didn't end it here, then there would be endless troubles in the future. After severely injuring Emperor Primordius with one move, Feathered Serpent Supremacy and Thoughtful Supremacy thought that Yishuan would come for them. Instantly, They were on high alert and prepared themselves, but who knew that Yi Shiwen had no intention of coming for them. Instead, he went for Emperor Primordius again, looking like he wouldn't stop until he was dead. Damn it! Emperor Primordius was shocked and angry. His killing intent to kill Yi Shiwen was strong, but Yi Shiwen's killing intent to kill him would only be stronger. Yi Shiwen would seize the opportunity to beat him up and get rid of him completely. Emperor Primordius was shocked and angry. What kind of person was he? How could he be forced to this point, to the point of killing him? Let's see how long you can last with your chi and blood declining. Yi Shiwen didn't use the universe creation palm this time. Instead, he punched out with the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. The fist energy turned into 6 paths of reincarnation and directly blasted towards Emperor Primordius. Emperor Primordius' injuries hadn't healed completely, and Yi Shiwen had already come for him. Emperor Primordius' face revealed a bit of anger. He immediately let out a long roar and raised the chi and blood in his body to the peak. The scriptures of chaos around him had completely manifested and directly collided with Yi Shiwen. Boom, boom, boom. Incomparably loud explosions sounded. In the sky, both sides exchanged thousands of moves in an instant. Their speed was fast to the peak. The burning chi and blood of both sides cooled the entire sky. And at this time, Feathered Serpent Supremacy and Thoughtful Supremacy had also come for the kill. They attacked Yi Shiwen from the left and right, forcing Yi Shiwen to stop attacking Emperor Primordius. At this time, Emperor Primordius finally retreated again and again, out of the attack range of Yi Shiwen's fist shadow. He couldn't help but gasp for breath. As he panted, blood splattered out. He was already seriously injured by the universe creation palm, and then he was forced to fight with Yi Shiwen. He couldn't suppress the injuries on his body anymore, and they completely broke out. Although there didn't seem to be any major wounds, his internal injuries were already very serious. Boom, boom, boom. Yi Shiwen blocked the sneak attack of Venerable Feathered Serpent and Humble Holy Senior by himself. Venerable Feathered Serpent unceasingly displayed many secret techniques and magical powers. They flooded over like the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. As for Holy Lord Innocent, he was sealed within the divine stone. While it seemed as though he was unable to move, in reality, all sorts of nomological laws were at his fingertips. Around him, a gigantic figure was formed. Through this figure formed from nomological laws, he was able to unleash all sorts of martial arts and mystiques. Its might was unimaginable. Get lost, Yi Shiwen shouted, and the time domain spread out from his body. The many secret techniques and magical powers that the two of them used were instantly slowed down when they attacked Yi Shiwen through the time domain. They slowed down to a speed that was visible to the naked eye, and they couldn't hurt Yi Shiwen at all. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Yi Shiwen's figure was like a bolt of lightning, flashing through these attacks and moving forward. In an instant, he arrived in front of Emperor Primordius. At this time, Emperor Primordius was recuperating and blood was still flowing from the corner of his mouth. He saw Yi Shiwen rushing towards him again. Yi Shiwen! Emperor Primordius was so shocked and angry that he called out Yi Shiwen's real name. He had stirred up trouble in the myriad heavens for so many years. How could he not know Yi Shiwen's real name? In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was just someone who got lucky and gained some benefits. But the murderous intent that Yi Shiwen burst out at this time was terrifying. How dare you? Why wouldn't I dare? I'm coming to kill you now. Yi Shiwen dodged the pincer attack of Venerable Feathered Serpent and Venerable Thoughtful and rushed towards him. The two of them didn't expect Yi Shiwen's murderous intent to be so strong, and his will was so firm that he was determined to kill Emperor Primordius. Emperor Primordius forcibly raised his chi and blood, and all the spiritual power in his body turned into a long spear and stabbed out. Universe Creation Palm. Yi Shiwen wanted to end the battle quickly, so he used Universe Creation Palm again in an instant. With the help of the Boundless Nature Palm, the power of this palm was amplified to a certain limit, and it directly blasted on the long spear. Boom! The long spear was blasted into pieces on the spot, and then the big hand fell on Emperor Primordius's body. All the defenses on Emperor Primordius's body couldn't stop it at all, and it was broken in an instant. And his physical body finally couldn't hold on under this palm. Puff! His entire physical body was smashed into pieces, and it exploded. Chapter 3398. Emperor Primordial Chaos Emperor's body exploded and collapsed on the spot. Under a series of attacks, Emperor Primordial Chaos Emperor finally couldn't hold on any longer. His body shattered on the spot, and he suffered heavy injuries. At this time, many heavenly venerables from the outer domains finally understood why this daring junior of the Fortune God dynasty dared to come and kill Emperor Primordial Chaos Emperor alone. He indeed had the strength and confidence to do so, especially now that they were in an unprecedentedly weak state. With their insight, they could naturally see that Yi Shiwen's current strength was unparalleled. He was surrounded by 4 heavenly venerables, and yet he could still suppress the situation in a domineering manner. If there was only one heavenly venerables, Emperor Primordial Chaos Emperor would probably not be able to escape. But now, Venerable Feathered Serpent, Thoughtful Sage, and Wild Beast Sage, who had almost recovered, were entangled in another battle. They couldn't rush over and take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kill Emperor Primordial Chaos Emperor. If the battle continues like this, I'm afraid it will be difficult for both sides to deal with the other. Although this Venerable Wu's combat strength is extraordinary, this stalemate will continue if he can't finish off one of them. In the end, when Great Sun Heavenly Venerables and Undying Evil Venerables return, he can only retreat. And if the others can't finish off Venerable Wu in one go, then their lack of vitality will become their most well-known flaw. Those with sharp eyes could immediately see the situation. In their opinion, both sides would be in a stalemate, and eventually nothing would come of it. However, whether it was Ishuin or the others, none of them were willing to end the battle in a stalemate, especially Yi Shiwen. Even when facing the siege of 4 outer domain heavenly venerables, he was unwilling to end the battle in a stalemate. Since he had come this time, he must kill Emperor Primordial Chaos Emperor. Otherwise, he would suffer a great loss this time. In this life, he was unparalleled. He had seen too many experts and fought too many tough battles. He had never given up so easily. The other heavenly venerables were also top-notch experts. Any one of them was a super expert who had experienced countless years. Their minds were firm and unshakable. Now that they had shed all pretense of cordiality, how could they give up so easily? No matter who was left alive, it would be a great calamity. Let's decide the winner. Yi Shiwen let out a roar, and his body shone with the radiance of the laws of the universe. The 3,000 martial Daos materialized and crushed the 9 heavens and 10 earths. He let out a long roar and immediately used the 6 Paths Reincarnation Fist, forming the 6 Paths Wheel and suppressing the surroundings. Good, that's exactly what I wanted. It was rare for both sides to reach an agreement at this time. They wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. Kara. After a series of intense exchanges, Saint Innocent's divine rock began to crack bit by bit. Soon, it shattered into a shower of rocks that rained down from the sky, revealing a figure within. It was a middle-aged man clad in armor, who knew how many bloody battles he had been through. The gaping hole in his chest clearly told everyone just how terrifying the life-and-death battles he had been through were. It was precisely because of this that he had sealed himself in the God Stone to prolong his life. Ordinary battles could have been completed even in the God Stone. However, things had already reached this point. Relying on the half-sealed state of the God Stone, he was no match for Yi Shiwen. Since it was time to go all out, he wouldn't be stingy to go all out. Wild Beast Venerable and Feathered Serpent Venerable's chi and blood were raised to the extreme at the same time. The sound of their chi and blood flowing was like muffled thunder, almost exploding the sky. Seeing that he couldn't chase after them, Yi Shiwen calmed down and shouted, "Saint Innocent, I think you're really courting death. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. I'll send you on your way so that you don't have to linger like this." Yishuan pounced towards Saint Innocent directly. His body emitted 3,000 martial daos, each of which turned into a peerless expert and directly entangled wild beast venerable and feathered serpent venerable. At this moment, everyone could see Yishuan's strategy. He would rather break one finger than hurt all 10. "Coming for me." Saint Innocent's face revealed a hint of anger. "Even in this state, I'm still not someone you can bully." Saint Innocent's chi and blood were boiling madly. In an instant, even his mana was surging. It was as if the time, space, and laws of this world were frozen, leaving only Saint Innocent's surging chi and blood. Innocent halberd. Saint Innocent's armor was shining, and a long halberd appeared in his hand. It cut through the sky and instantly slashed at Yishuan's face, who was pouncing towards him. Yishuan, on the other hand, couldn't move at all. It was as if he was stuck in mud, encountering a huge problem. "I don't know how many arrogant people like you I've killed." Saint Innocent's face revealed a hint of smugness. His combat power at his peak was completely different from what it was just now. "Trying to trap me? Don't even think about it." Yishuan roared. His entire body was burning fiercely, and the Nanmingli fire instantly spread out. The nomological domain that Honorable Sage Venerable Ernest had spread out was also completely destroyed in an instant. Immediately after, Yishuan punched out. Boom! A loud sound was heard, and a terrifying collision broke out. Both Yishuan's fist and the big halberd made a clanging sound, and sparks splashed in all directions. At the same time, the bodies of these two supreme powerhouses had also changed. Yishuan's chi and blood were surging, like the surface of a raging tide, constantly fluctuating. It looked extremely shocking. On the other side, Saint Innocent's situation wasn't so good. Blood began to flow out of the wounds on his body. During the fight with Yishuan just now, his injuries were affected, and they were all exposed. After that, Yishuan's body moved slightly. Then his whole body directly flew up and rushed up to kill. He launched a counterattack instantly. His movements were fast and urgent, and he punched out again almost instantly. The 6 paths of reincarnation was rotating, and it seemed to be undergoing a wonderful evolution and transformation, suppressing Saint Innocent on the spot. Boom! Saint Innocent flew out on the spot, coughing up mouthfuls of blood. His situation wasn't as good as the others. Just an ordinary attack was enough to put him in a difficult position. His situation was too special, and the injuries on his body were too much of a burden. He couldn't unleash sufficient combat power at all. It was precisely because the injuries on his body were too severe that he chose to join the ranks of the primordial Chaos Emperor in order to seize the opportunity in the subsequent recovery. As long as he devoured Yishuan's life source and blood essence, he would be able to recover quickly. But it was precisely because of the injuries on his body that he couldn't unleash his true combat power to the fullest. At this moment, the injuries on his body were affected, and his old injuries relapsed. Blood splattered and sprinkled into the starry sky. He was extremely angry. When he was at his peak, he was invincible. Who had he been afraid of? Yishuan couldn't possibly be his match at all. But now, he was being suppressed by Yishuan. What kind of experience was this? How could he endure this? I'm not resigned to this. Wu Zun, you will definitely pay the price. Not resigned? What's there to be unresigned about? Yishuan sneered. Then he suddenly kicked out with his foot. It was like a lightning that tore through the night sky, and it landed on Holy Venerable Innocent's body. Holy Venerable Innocent was kicked directly, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Yishuan's attack speed was too fast. Be it the Feathered Serpent Lord or the Wild Beast Lord, they were both very strong. More than half of the 3,000 martial arts incarnations that Yishuan had released were slaughtered in mere moments. There wasn't much time left for him. He could only choose to end the battle quickly. His vitality was more abundant. This was his greatest advantage. And now, he was going to turn this advantage into the final result of victory. Yi Shiwen's countless visions manifested, disintegrating heaven and earth, and forming his own domain that belonged to Wuzun. In this domain, he was an invincible god, the sole ruler of heaven and earth. At the same time, he waved his fist and unleashed the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Rumbling sounds spread out like the treasured sounds of the great Tao, shaking the ripples of the laws. No matter what means you have, no matter what kind of existence you were in the past, holy venerable innocent, you're dead today. The domain that Yi Shiwen emitted locked onto holy venerable innocent in an instant, imprisoning him within and rendering him unable to move. Although it was only for a short period of time, it was enough for him. I'll finish you off with this move. Universe Creation Palm. Everything happened in that instant, and Yi Shiwen's attack had already arrived. He reversed his palm and slapped it directly on Holy Venerable Innocent's body. Bang! Holy Venerable Innocent's body exploded in an instant, and blood burst out and spread like a rainstorm. Holy Venerable Innocent's body exploded and turned into a rain of blood. Compared to Emperor Hun Yuan, he was in an even more tragic state. In the intense battle just now, the injuries in his body had finally been triggered, making him incomparably tragic. He wanted to end the battle quickly and suppress Yi Shiwen with his full strength. However, the reality was much worse than he had imagined. Even though he had released his main body from the Divine Stone, the increase in combat power that came with it was still not enough to suppress Yi Shiwen. Instead, he was suppressed by Yi Shiwen, and this was the price that he had to pay. The rain of blood that Holy Venerable Innocent's body had turned into quickly dispersed into the distance, trying to escape from Yi Shiwen's attack range. But at this point, how could Yi Shiwen let him escape? The Avicii sword appeared in his hand, and he instantly slashed out. The sword light split into millions of sword lights in the void, and every sword light chased after a drop of blood rain. Not one sword more, and not one sword less. The sword light completely shattered the blood rain, turning it into nothingness in the sky. Chapter 33:99. One sword annihilated all the vitality of honest sage venerable. This sword could even pierce into the endless dimensions and completely annihilate honest sage venerable spirit that was outside the path of creation. Annihilate all possibilities of his revival. Yi Shiwen was no longer a celestial master. At that time, he didn't have many means to kill a celestial master. He could only slowly grind the celestial master bit by bit. Now, he had the ability to strike like a thunderbolt. Compared to the past, he couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. It was really terrifying to be able to annihilate all vitality in an instant, because Celestial Master experts were very difficult to kill. Only Celestial Masters who were also Celestial Masters could penetrate the past and the future in an instant and kill everything in the world. This. Many Celestial Masters from the outer domain widened their eyes and said dumbfoundedly. They had already guessed that the battle between the two sides would break out at any moment, and casualties were inevitable. But just now, they thought that it might be a stalemate. Now, Yi Shiwen instantly shattered their previous assertions. It was more or less like a slap in the face. However, what really shocked them was that perhaps they had been locked up for too long. They were already a little unable to adapt to Yi Shiwen's decisive style of killing. It was normal for them to kill others decisively. But if others also showed them such a bloody scene, it was a little unbearable for them. Wild Beast Master and Feathered Serpent Master were also stunned. At this time, they had just killed all the 3,000 martial arts incarnations released by Yi Shiwen. The whole process didn't take much time at all. It was very short. But even so, when they came back to their senses, undeserved Supreme Sage had actually been slain. This young junior was simply too tyrannical. Honest Sage Venerable's body exploded into pieces. His entire body's flesh and blood were completely burned into ashes by a group of flames. After Yi Shiwen's injuries were triggered, it couldn't be stopped at all. Not even a trace was left. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but feel a little pity. The corpse of a celestial master was such a precious treasure. Unfortunately, he couldn't keep it. But fortunately, There were others. Yishuin turned around. His eyes were as cold as lightning. He stared at venerable feathered snake and venerable wild beast as if he was looking at ice-cold corpses. Venerable feathered serpent and venerable wild beast revealed a shocked and angry expression on their faces. Yishuin had dared to treat them as if they were dead. It was a great humiliation. Brat, killing a seriously injured heavenly master is nothing. Now, I will let you understand that we are not to be trifled with. Venerable wild beast shouted loudly. The injuries left behind by Yishuin had almost recovered by now. He could finally attack again. A strange power was surging in his body. Suddenly, a devil godlike figure emerged from the endless flesh and blood on his body. It surrounded Yishuin from the front and back. The aura of time was flowing on this figure. It had traces of the passage of time. It was incomparably terrifying and extremely powerful. This incarnation is not simple. Yishuin narrowed his eyes. Venerable martial artist, don't think that you're the only one who can release your Taoist incarnation. Your Taoist incarnation pales in comparison to mine. Venerable wild beast revealed a cold smile on his face. Soon, Yishuin's face revealed a cold smile, because he had already understood that this venerable wild beast incarnation was indeed not like his martial arts incarnation. It was purely formed by martial arts will incarnation. Instead, it was nurtured by his blood essence. It was a bit like Yishuin's sword master's incarnation. It was just that it didn't have the independent power like Yishuin's sword master's incarnation. But in this kind of battle, it could erupt with great power. Roar! That incomparably huge figure roared, and then rushed towards Yishuin to kill. Even if there is another incarnation, so what? You are still going to die today. Yishuin roared and slapped out with his palm. It turned into a monstrous giant hand, and then slapped down fiercely. The mad beast Venerable's doppelganger, which was like a demon god, was blown away on the spot. Formed the three talents formation. At this time, Venerable feathered serpent roared and took the lead, stepping on the first position. Behind him, Venerable wild beast and his incarnation stood side by side, forming a huge three talents formation. With the power of the formation, they blasted towards Yishuin. At this time, they could also see that they might not be Yishuin's opponent if they fought alone. So, the three of them formed a three talents formation and blasted towards Yishuin. Yishuin was fearless and domineering. He directly killed his way into the three talents formation. From the corner of his eyes, he had already caught a glimpse of Emperor Primordial Chaos recovering at an astonishing speed. In this case, there was not much time left for him. Not to mention, there was still Great Sun Heavenly Master and Undying Evil Master further away. He did not know when they would appear. The three talents formation displayed by three Heavenly Master level experts was unparalleled. Even if they had never cooperated before, they could burst out with tacit understanding that was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. I don't care how much power you have. Die. Yishuin was not afraid. He did not have that much time to suppress them. There was only one choice left. Universe Creation Palm. Facing the three people who surrounded him with the three talents formation, Yishuin did not stop at all. He did not hesitate to display the Universe Creation Palm on the spot. Boom! Suddenly, it was like a surging river. Endless waves covered the sky and covered the earth. It was as turbulent as the sea. The interweaving and formation of the laws had no effect here at all. Yishuin's palm was like a boulder that had been thrown into the water, setting off a monstrous tide. The terrifying power made the three people who had formed the three talents formation feel as if the world was going to be destroyed. They had never seen a more terrifying power than this. However, they felt that no more terrifying power could be compared to this. It was unparalleled, and it couldn't be compared to this. It made them feel even more terrifying. Their chi and blood were shaken, especially the incarnation of Venerable Wild Beast, which was unstable and showed signs of dispersing. It's just one blow. Even the three people who formed the three talents formation are no match for him. Could the universe creation palm really be so terrifying? Many heavenly sovereigns from the other regions involuntarily inhaled a breath of cold air, although they also recognized the fortune creation heavenly monarch as the #1 expert in the world. In reality, it was because the fortune creation heavenly monarch was truly invincible. Even the top experts of the outer domain who had dominated the world were defeated by him. However, they did not feel that the martial arts of the fate creation heaven lord were so terrifying. If the fate creation heaven lord used it, he would naturally be invincible. He could overturn rivers and seas. However, it was not the fate creation heaven lord. It was Yi Shiwen. In terms of actual realm, he was much weaker than them. How could he still have such terrifying combat power? Rumble. Yi Shiwen's universe creation palm fell. The power of this palm shook the Three Talents formation on the spot. The entire Three Talents formation was already on the verge of collapse. Yi Shiwen's palm was extremely powerful. Now, a corner of the Three Talents formation had collapsed. Naturally, it was the weakest corner, which was the incarnation of venerable wild beast. In front of Yi Shiwen's universe creation palm, he was too weak. His combat power that was comparable to an ordinary heavenly master could not be reflected here. That was because venerable wild beast's chi and blood were insufficient. How could he be fully supplied? Boom! An enormous explosion resounded. The mad bee sovereign's avatar let out a miserable shriek, and then his body exploded into a rain of blood that rained down from the sky. Although his combat power was comparable to a heavenly master, he was not a heavenly master after all. It was impossible for him to disperse and reassemble. He was not like Yi Shiwen's sword master, who could almost be treated as an independent cultivator. If he dispersed, he would disperse. The Three Talents formation was broken. Venerable feathered serpent and venerable wild beast immediately suffered a huge backlash. The more they invested in this kind of formation, the more they would gain. However, once the formation was broken, the more backlash they would suffer. Although the Three Talents formation could greatly increase the strength of the three people, there was still a limit. Once the limit was reached, everything would turn into ashes. Both of them only felt that their chi and blood were surging uncontrollably. They almost vomited blood. Good opportunity, now is the time. Yi Shiwen seized this opportunity. Rays of light instantly appeared under his feet. He suddenly rushed to the front of the two. Almost at the same time, he stretched out his hands, clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and blasted out fiercely. 6 paths of reincarnation. The terrifying fist energy turned into 6 paths of reincarnation and suppressed the two fiercely. If the two were in good condition, this move might not be effective. However, at this time, both of them were dizzy from the backlash of the Three Talents formation. Their chi and blood were surging, and they were almost on the verge of injury. How could they stop the attack of this punch? Boom! Boom! The two of them were hit by the 2 punches almost at the same time. They flew out on the spot, spurting blood from their mouths. They felt like their bodies were falling apart. They suffered serious injuries, and the spiritual power in their bodies was about to explode uncontrollably. After blasting the 2 of them away with 1 punch, Yi Shiwen saw the 2 of them flying in different directions. He almost immediately made a decision. He strode forward and chased in the direction of venerable wild beast. A trample landed. His strength was already greatly reduced because his doppelganger was destroyed. Now he was seriously injured. How could venerable wild beast, who was in a worse situation, resist this trample? Boom! Then, before he could recover, Yi Shiwen's Avicii sword followed closely behind him and directly destroyed his primordial spirit. Yi Shiwen's Avicii sword didn't even have time to recover. Another one was killed. Chapter 3400. Wild Beast Lord also couldn't resist Yi Shiwen's attack and was killed. At this moment, the heavenly lords from the outer domain finally had the intention to take Yi Shiwen seriously. This junior was by no means a lucky one. He was indeed extraordinary. He killed 2 heavenly lords in a row. Many people with discerning eyes could see that Yi Shiwen's method wasn't anything special. He had merely used the universe creation palm to pave the way, and he had supplemented it with other lost techniques to kill. It was such a simple routine. However, it was impossible to resist, especially the universe creation palm. It allowed Yi Shiwen to possess a super strong attack power that surpassed his own strength. Otherwise, with the strength of wild beast lord and sincere sage, even if they weren't at their peak, they wouldn't be killed so easily. Oh no! Venerable feathered serpent resisted the surging blood and qi and retreated repeatedly. Sure enough, just as he retreated, the place where he was just standing was swept by a sword light and directly turned into nothingness. Whatever laws, space, time, everything was completely turned into nothingness under this sword. Unlike them, their qi and blood were insufficient. The more they fought, the weaker they became. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen's qi and blood were surging, and he didn't lack peerless medicinal herbs that could replenish qi. He had many creation Xian pills alone. Therefore, the more he fought, the stronger he would become. In this series of fights with heavenly lords, Yi Shiwen gained a lot of benefits. His understanding of the heavenly lord realm became deeper and deeper, and he was closer to breaking through to the third realm. After killing 2 heavenly lords in a row, Venerable Feathered Serpent no longer had the foolish thought that Yi Shiwen couldn't kill them. This matter also changed from being in the bag, where there wouldn't be any problems, to being dangerous. Originally, they were the hunters who wanted to kill Yi Shiwen. But now the offensive and defensive situation had changed. The real hunter was Yi Shiwen. He could only delay now. Those heavenly lords who were originally unwilling to enter the battlefield saw Yi Shiwen's unparalleled killing methods and ruthless killing intent. How could they still be willing to enter the battlefield? Although the universe creation palm was good, they needed to be alive to enjoy it. It was obvious that Mad Beast Venerable and Honest Sacred Venerable didn't understand, which was why they ended up losing their lives. At this moment, he could only try his best to stall for time until Imperial Monarch Primordial Chaos recovered. Then, they might be able to protect themselves if they joined forces. Otherwise, even protecting themselves would be an extravagant hope. He retreated again and again. He didn't want to confront Yi Shiwen head-on. Firstly, he wanted to stall for time. Secondly, he wanted to buy enough time for his own recovery. Even if an Empyrean's recovery wasn't at its peak, it was still terrifying. You want to leave? It won't be that easy. Yi Shiwen let out a long and loud shout. His body blossomed with 7 colored rays of light and soared into the sky. The world lost its color in an instant. Whether it was the sky, the earth, or anything else, everything was overshadowed in front of this blazing rays of light. Universe Creation Palm. Great Sage Yi Shiwen berated. At this moment, he was the only righteous god in the world. He had cut down all the demons. In the end, he couldn't see anything. He could only see a blazing expanse. It was vast and boundless. The power of the world was under the control of his palm. Damn it, I can't escape. Venerable Feathered Serpent was horrified to find that he couldn't move his body. The world principles were under Yi Shiwen's control. They had transformed into a cage around him. One by one, they emerged from a hidden place. They were like a big net and had trapped him. His plan to escape and stall for time had been foiled. At that moment, he really wanted to escape. As for Imperial Monarch Primordial Chaos, he didn't even consider it. According to Yi Shiwen's performance just now, he should hate Imperial Monarch Primordial Chaos to death. He shouldn't chase after him. But he never expected that Yi Shiwen really hated Imperial Monarch Primordial Chaos, but it didn't mean that he would let him go. The universe creation palm turned over. It was almost like the whole world had turned upside down. It was unparalleled. Boom! The heavens and the earth exploded, and the universe trembled. Yi Shiwen's universe creation palm directly turned into a sky full of light rain and scattered. 2 figures gradually emerged from it. One of them was naturally Yi Shiwen. He stood between the heavens and the earth like a god of creation. controlling everything. His expression was incomparably cold. Nothing in front of him could move him. Opposite him, venerable feathered serpent's huge serpent tail had exploded. Blood was constantly dripping down from the sky. The reason why it didn't sprinkle all at once was that in the sky, the space had collapsed and appeared fragmented. The blood sprayed into the fragmented space, but it couldn't all fall. Venerable feathered serpent only had a human body left. He looked extremely embarrassed. He almost fell into a pool of blood. He had paid a great price to resist the universe creation palm. An extremely resentful look flashed in his eyes. Why wasn't he at his peak now? He was too weak when facing Yishuin. His lower body, the huge serpent tail, was gradually recovering. But at this time, Yishuin obviously wouldn't give him the chance. After the successful attack, he knew that it was the final moment. A big halberd appeared in his hand. It was none other than the big halberd that Honorable Sage Innocent had previously used. At this time, it had fallen into Yishuin's hand. Of course, Yishuin hadn't fully released the power of this big halberd, let alone the top-secret magical power and means contained in it. However, this was already enough for Yishuin. He had thoroughly sealed the tool spirit contained within it. Then, he brandished it in his hand. It looked just like a divine weapon of the mortal world. It seemed as if a tiger was brandishing it. The wind quickly formed a violent storm. Only then did everyone see clearly that the wind was actually the craziness of the laws. Countless laws formed talismans, undulating up and down in the storm, constantly rotating. What a terrifying, monstrous power! Many Empyreans couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when they saw this scene. Using this halberd as an ordinary weapon wasn't a big deal in itself. However, the fact that it could wield such astonishing power was what shocked everyone the most. Die! Yishuin shouted, and the big halberd in his hand slashed down. The sharp crescent moon drew a terrifying light in the sky and fell on Honorable Sage Feathered Snake. This halberd technique was also superb. Although he hadn't had much contact with it, he had cultivated to this level, and it wasn't difficult for him to learn any kind of martial arts. Damn it! Honorable Sage Feathered Snake roared and formed a cross with his hands. He used the back of his hands to receive this attack. Dense snake scales appeared on his arms, and each of these snake scales was extremely sturdy. In the outside world, they would be the best material for refining tools. Clang! There was a sound like metal colliding, and sparks splashed on Honorable Sage Feathered Snake's arms. Both of Honorable Sage Feathered Snake's arms were trembling. Although he had forcibly blocked this big halberd, the huge power couldn't be stopped. It directly dispersed into his hands, causing them to tremble. What was even more terrifying was that he discovered that Yishuin was only using his right hand to wield the big halberd. He had used one hand to suppress both of his hands. This monstrous power was the most terrifying. Previously, everyone was attracted by the cosmic creation palm that he had displayed. No one had noticed that he had such a move. His physical cultivation was really terrifying, especially among the celestial masters. There were almost no flaws. Everyone's physical body was an extremely perfect Tao body. Those that weren't perfect had already turned into ashes in the heavens' retribution. How could they have the opportunity to enter the heavenly master realm? However, even so, it paled in comparison to Yishuin. Could it be that his main direction of cultivation was the direction of the physical body, and not the comprehension of the great path? Although there were very few people who took such an extreme path, it wasn't that there weren't any. It was contrary to the mainstream direction of the comprehension of the great path. Countless thoughts emerged in Honorable Sage Feathered Snake's mind. However, it only lasted for a moment. Then, he was horrified to see Yishuin's face revealing a sneer. Then, Yishuin suddenly pulled the big halberd in his hand down. The sharp crescent blade directly tore the scales on the back of his hand. Puff! The crescent blade tore his scales and directly cut into his flesh. Blood splashed out. This was the horror of the celestial master Dao tool. Even if it was used as an ordinary weapon, it could still tear apart all the defenses of a celestial master. "Ah!" Honorable Sage, Feathered Snake screamed. Then, everyone saw that both of his arms that had formed a cross were chopped off by Yishuin. The pair of hands fell to the ground and suddenly set off thousands of feet of dust waves. It was as if two huge stars had smashed down. The power was unimaginable. The winner has been decided. Seeing this, everyone understood that the winner had been decided. It was impossible for Honorable Sage, Feathered Snake, to resist Yi Shiwen's next attack. Yi Shiwen brandished the heavenly halberd in his hand. He was about to launch a further sneak attack. However, Lord Feathered Serpent saw that he was about to be defeated. He was about to die. So, he wasn't willing to give up. "Revered martial artist, even if I die, I want you to be buried with me." Venerable Feathered Serpent suddenly opened his eyes. His pupils suddenly contracted and then released an intense burst of energy. His whole body was burning and then transformed into a mouthful of blood-colored innate energy. It then transformed into a blood-colored airwave and swept towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen instinctively felt an extremely dangerous aura, and the heavenly halberd in his hand suddenly fell down and directly chopped this blood chi into pieces on the spot. His arm was still trembling violently, and one could well imagine what kind of terrifying power he had encountered. If he had taken it with his bare hands, he would have been seriously injured in an instant. Fortunately, the heavenly halberd and the boundless nature manifestation hand had dissipated most of the power. Honorable Sage Feathered Snake's face showed an extremely unwilling expression when he saw that his last attack had failed. In the end, he shattered and turned into ashes that filled the sky. Chapter 34:01. Seeing Senior Feathered Serpent's final heroic attack failed and died tragically, many heavenly masters showed a look of sympathy. Senior Feathered Serpent was such a powerful figure that it was difficult to find an opponent in the world. But now, he died here, in the hands of a junior of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Looking at Yi Shiwen's invincibility, they couldn't help but have the illusion that the waves behind pushed the waves ahead, and the waves ahead were about to die on the beach. Yi Shiwen became slightly vigilant. The means of these veteran celestial masters couldn't be underestimated. It was especially so when he was fighting against someone of a higher realm with a lower realm. He couldn't guarantee what kind of powerful means they had. He almost fell into Senior Feathered Serpent's trap just now. But now, 3 stumbling blocks were finally eradicated, and only one person was left. Emperor Primordial Chaos, it's your turn. There are no more obstacles between us. It's time to settle the scores of tens of thousands of years. Yi Shiwen's eyes were as cold as a knife, staring at Emperor Primordial Chaos, who was meditating on the other side. At this time, Emperor Primordius finally opened his eyes. The injuries on his body had mostly healed. His heart was cold to the extreme. He had watched the other 3 Empyreans die in order to buy enough time for himself. This was nothing to him. In fact, if it were Senior Feathered Serpent and the others, there wouldn't be much difference. It's just that compared to them, he seemed colder. When the 3 heavenly masters died, his state of mind didn't even fluctuate, let alone rescue them. You're really cold. They risked their lives to buy time for you, but you didn't even try to save them. Yi Shiwen said coldly, "For them to be able to save me, it can be said that they died a worthy death." Emperor Primordial Chaos was unmoved. He had a heart of stone. These foreign heavenly masters usually fought with each other. At this time, it was just because of the cooperation between interests. "Worthy death, ha, well said." Yi Shiwen laughed heartily, and the halberd in his hand slightly trembled. He was refining the halberd, and he had sealed the tool spirit of the halberd before forcibly using it. And now, he was truly refining the halberd. It was just that his cultivation base had already reached a tyrannical level. He didn't need much preparation and could forcibly refine this ancient halberd. Tens of thousands of years ago, I would have never imagined that you would actually be able to reach your current level. Imperial Emperor Primordial Chaos easily admitted his mistake. He had made countless powerful enemies in his life. Putting aside those in the fortune realm, He had also made many imperial emperors who had dominated the heavens and earth and dominated the world. Many of them had suffered at his hands, and many of them had even been played in the palm of his hand. The 10 people who had been appointed as emperor lords by him had indeed seemed very glorious at the time. However, looking at it now, wasn't it also a kind of tragedy? In fact, it wasn't just these people who had suffered under his hands. The previous emperor of the fallen angel clan, Yimo's teacher, the demon king, and many celestial venerables had all fallen in his hands. Some of them fled in a sorry state, struggling to catch their breath. Some of them were killed and became his food in the end. In his opinion, Yishuin should be like the other imperial emperors who had been played in the palm of his hand and eventually died in his hands. However, the reality was not like this. Not only did Yishuin escape from his control, but he also smashed the means that he had arranged for many years. He had failed twice in his life. Apart from that person, the junior in front of him was the biggest accident. However, compared to that person, this person was more terrifying and more aggressive. Life is too long. No one knows the future, Yishuin faintly said. In that summer, the teenager who had crossed over had probably never thought that one day he would be able to reach such a level. He would stand above all living beings and become one of the few masters in the world. In fact, his future might even be more glorious. If I had known this long ago, I would have killed you even if I had to use all my chess pieces and not leave any future troubles. Unfortunately, there is nothing in this life except for if. Emperor Hunyuan also said with some emotion. In the countless years, the biggest thing he thought about was to survive, even if it was to live a life of hunger. In addition, his second wish was to get out of trouble. For these two wishes, he had racked his brains and used unscrupulous means. However, when he finally got out of trouble, he was greeted by his old enemy. That's right. Fate brought us to this point, so we have no choice. Today, either you die or I die. Yishuin's eyes suddenly burst out with a touch of brilliance. The heavenly halberd in his hand instantly burst out with terrifying rays of light. The blazing rays of light instantly covered the heaven and earth, and then turned into a long dragon that instantly chopped down. In the end, he still took the initiative to attack first. Just now, he was also very clear that Emperor Hunyuan was stalling for time. How could a person like him reminisce about the so-called past in a battle of this level? That fool had died countless years ago, but he still let him carry out the so-called reminiscence because he also needed time to refine the heavenly halberd. Now, the time was finally up. The heavenly halberd in his hand suddenly struck, blooming a brilliant golden brilliance. All kinds of martial, Tao, traces danced in the air, and the laws were endless. This strike cut off time, and at the same time, it collapsed the galaxy, and the world was about to turn into powder. At this moment, Yishuin had become extremely dangerous. On the other hand, Emperor Hunyuan slightly raised his hand, blooming endless chaotic energy, and directly blocked Yishuin's attack. Yishuin, you are very good, but you are still far from it, Emperor Hunyuan said coldly. How could this be? Yishuin suddenly felt that Emperor Hunyuan's strength had suddenly increased by a lot, and his strength had directly risen to the terrifying third realm. Today is the day you die. As soon as Emperor Hunyuan's voice fell, a blood-colored spear appeared in his hand, and the spear turned around and shot straight at Yishuin's face. Walalala! Wherever the spear passed, the laws fluctuated violently, forming a terrible storm around it. And in the center of the storm was this spear. At this time, he truly displayed the supreme majesty and strength that belonged to a heavenly master. Compared to his previous dispirited and listless performance, it was far too different. Dang! At this critical moment, Yishuin withdrew the heavenly halberd to defend himself. An astonishing sound of metal colliding rang out, and sparks burst out in all directions, forming a terrible sea of fire. Dang, dang, dang. Yishuin's figure retreated again and again. The sudden burst of power from Emperor Hunyuan forced him to retreat again and again. You want to fight? Yi Shiwen's eyes burst with a bright light. He immediately judged that Emperor Primordius's strength had increased by so much all of a sudden. He must be planning to go all out and erupt all of his martial power and life source here. Let's see how long you can last. After this battle, you will die. When the time comes, I will swallow your life source and blood essence. There will be no future troubles. Emperor Primordial Chaos's face finally revealed a somewhat ferocious expression. He had already made up his mind to swallow Yi Shiwen's life source and blood essence to make up for the losses he had suffered in this battle. Moreover, he could even advance further without any losses. Of course, the premise was that he could win. Swallow my life source and blood essence? Wait until you defeat me first. Yi Shiwen was fearless. He took a step forward and slashed down with the halberd in his hand. The halberd shone brightly, formed from the burning laws. Yi Shiwen did not retreat. Instead, he advanced bravely, directly rushing up to kill. The blood-colored spear in Emperor Huanyuan's hand stabbed out, clashing with Yi Shiwen. Dang! 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 There was a violent collision sound as the two sides quickly fought. Emperor Huanyuan, who had temporarily recovered part of his strength, displayed amazing combat strength. As a veteran heavenly master, his tyrannical strength completely broke out. The other heavenly masters showed a look of as expected on their faces. This should be the strength of a veteran emperor. The previous battle was too stifling. In such a battle, Yi Shiwen could only be at a disadvantage. He was more on the defensive than the offensive. Compared to the tyrannical battle tactics from before, it was no longer the same as before. Yi Shiwen, I will let you die with regret today. Emperor Huanyuan shouted, but his attacks did not stop for a moment. They continued to fall, and every time they collided, a terrible storm of laws would appear. Yi Shiwen was on the defensive. He did not answer because he knew very well what Emperor Huanyuan was thinking. He was clearly trying to divert his attention. A series of attacks came like a storm. Yi Shiwen was like a small boat in a storm that could capsize at any time. But no matter how hard Emperor Huanyuan attacked, he couldn't break through Yi Shiwen's line of defense. In the beginning, many heavenly masters were still guessing when Yi Shiwen's defense would be broken. After a long time, they noticed that something was wrong. Because Yi Shiwen seemed to be on the defensive, but in fact, there was no danger of destruction. It just looked dangerous. The situation was very subtle. Soon, Emperor Huanyuan also saw that something was wrong. Because according to his estimation, this series of attacks should have already successfully broken through Yi Shiwen's defense, or even killed him. However, the reality was not as smooth as he had expected. Yi Shiwen's defense was like an iron wall that could not be broken. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and he was instantly shocked, and he immediately withdrew his attack. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.